today's subject is profoundly important, and I'm so glad that you're here and you've chosen our venue. So welcome and have a very, very productive day. Thank you.
See, instead of having the dean of the school, we brought the president of the university. So we upgraded the chancellor of the campus. And now I want to quickly have Michael Rickards come up, who's the executive director of the Policy Institute, the Hall Policy Institute, who is our co-sponsor today. Michael, please.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to be here to welcome you and to bring good wishes from our founder and sponsor, George Hall, who couldn't be here this morning, but extends his very best wishes to all of you. I should mention also that I'm an alum of Rutgers Newark, and so I'm very proud to be back here. It's been a while, and delighted to see the progress that the Chancellor has identified. The success of this meeting is basically due to the hard work of two people, and I want to acknowledge them. First, Rich Keevy of Rutgers. You know Richard, of course, he just spoke. And Richard Lee, who's our Director of Communications at the Hall Institute. It's an important topic. It's a topic that I think all of you are going to be interested in, and some of you may be voting on different aspects of what we discussed today at referenda over the years. And so I'm very pleased that you took your morning and decided to come and be with us. Thank you very much.
Hi again. It's my pleasure and honor to introduce our keynote speaker today. You have his bio, as you have everybody's bio in your program, but I would be remiss if I did not give you some formal comments about our keynote speaker. As you know, Mr. Hanson was asked by Governor Christie to chair the Gaming, Sports, and Entertainment Advisory Commission and provide the governor with his insights and recommendations. You will hear about this report in just a minute. In real life, Mr. Hanson is the founder and chairman of the Hampshire Companies, which is a fully integrated real estate operating company and sponsor of real estate equity investment funds for high net worth individuals, foundations, endowments, and pension funds. Hampshire owns and operates over 20 million square feet of commercial real estate. John, as your bio will show you, has served on various and numerous corporate boards, including being the lead director of Prudential Financial and chairman of the board of Health South. John is also involved with many civic and nonprofit organizations, including being past chairman of the National Football Foundation, the College Hall of Fame, and the New Jersey Sports and Exposition Authority. In his spare time, he has served Governor Kane as the chairman of his transition committee and Governor Christie as chairman of his finance committee. Looks like John knows how to be a smart procrastinator rather than a gambler. John, please. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Rich. Just before I start, the reason I'm able to have the opportunities here in New Jersey to do this is because my wife produced a very smart son who's here with us today who runs the business, and he tells me it's up to 25 million square feet. My son, Jimmy Hanson's right over there. Jimmy, would you wave, please? In November of 2009, as Rich just mentioned, Governor-elect Christie appointed me to chair a subcommittee of the Transition Committee to review gaming, sports, and entertainment in New Jersey. We delivered our report with various recommendations in January. We were required to have that report in not more than 20 pages. And it's a little bit difficult sometimes to write a short note, so we had to work really hard to do it because we probably could have written at least 50 pages. We submitted the report, mission accomplished, back to our daytime jobs. Well, that's what we thought. Well, the bottom line of that report is is that we have some broken business models in the areas in which we were asked to explore. Now, we explored more than the Sports Authority, more than Atlantic City. In fact, we talked to all the major franchises in New Jersey, and the object of the transition report is to permit the incoming administration to know good news, bad news, players that are there that you think can be very helpful, and if there's any changes that you recommend. So, as I said, we thought our job was done. Well, he goes from governor-elect to being the governor, and talk about the governor. I see Governor Florio just come in. Welcome, Jim. Well, Governor Christie had other ideas. On February the 2nd, he signed an executive order establishing a 7-person advisory commission on the following: to determine the ongoing financial viability of the Jersey Sports and Exposition Authority, the advancement or otherwise resolution of the stalled Xanadu project in the Meadowlands, the perceived need to improve the competitiveness of the gaming industry in Atlantic City, the perceived need to ensure that New Jersey's horse racing industry becomes self-sustaining, and the perceived need to engender a spirit of cooperation among New Jersey's major entertainment venues. On the committee, which I was asked to chair, and first I have to tell you the background of the governor when he puts you on an executive order committee. No budget, no staff, and needless to say, no compensation. Notwithstanding, there were 7 of us that agreed to do it, and while we worked as a committee of the whole, each one had an area of expertise that they brought, and where they were asked to write that segment of our report, which I believe has been distributed to you. So Bob Mulcahy, Bob's responsibility was horse racing. Wes Line's responsibility was Xanadu. Al Leiter was involved with talking to the various entertainment venues. Finn Wentworth was assigned to Atlantic City. I've had the task of writing about the Sports Authority, and Deborah DiLorenzo, her task was to critique what we had done. And so we had 5 people write, transmitted to Bob Holmes. Bob Holmes is a professor here at Rutgers Law School, and say, Bob, you have to produce this report as if one person wrote it. So, and I think he did. So, having said that, on a very warm day in July, it's like July 21st, we presented our findings and our recommendations to Governor Christie, first at the new football stadium in the Meadowlands, and thereafter we traveled down to Atlantic City and on the boardwalk delivered our report. And needless to say, the governor then made his comments, and we did get a lot of front page press. And again, we thought our mission was accomplished. However, the governor apparently had other ideas. So here we are today, and basically what I'd like to talk about is, all right, you gave me a report, you talked about all these various areas, so what's happening today? And I think the good news about our report is within 6 months of our report, major legislation was passed pertaining to Atlantic City, pertaining to horse racing, and that was one accomplishment. And during the course of our report, we were able to negotiate bringing the New Jersey Nets here to Newark, and that was strictly a financial transaction. The Nets said that they were going to depart for Brooklyn. Could they go to Newark sooner rather than later? And the bottom line of that was the finances were so much in the favor of the Sports Authority if they received compensation rather than to operate with the immediate intervention of the governor, we were able to consummate that transaction. I'm hopeful that one of the benefits beside the finances for the sports complex would be the opportunity to have to bring another NBA team here at such time as the Nets were to depart, and that was one of the conditions which the Nets agreed that they would not object if such an opportunity were to occur. If I look back at the history of horse racing in northern New Jersey, it reminds me that long before we had the Meadowlands Racetrack, there was a gentleman by the name of Bill King that endeavored to build a racetrack in Secaucus. And if one were to drive on Route 3 past Secaucus and look out, there's a William Cain Stadium. And I'm not sure this is correct, but I have a good feeling that was the location where he wanted to locate a racetrack. And this is back when I was a youngster. So if you want to know how old I am, it was in the late 40s into the early 50s. But I'm like Benjamin Button. When I got to 70, I went backwards. So having said that, it's important to understand that the private sector wanted racing in northern New Jersey for a long time. And eventually, under Governor Cahill and Brendan Byrne, this concept of the Sports Authority was established. And I remember being on opening night at the Meadowlands Racetrack, and the announced crowd was 42,000 people. And in those days, you did not have the third level. It was a crowd. It probably is the largest crowd that they ever had, other than maybe Hamiltonian Day when you've had some tents that were over. And it was successful. The racing was successful. I see some people here from the harness racing field, and while both breeds ran there, I think that the Meadowlands Racetrack is best known on a global basis for harness racing, standard racing. Unfortunately, today, that has changed. And in our report to the governor, we laid forth 4 options that were available from our viewpoint. Again, going back to those ideas that the governor gave us about the financial viability, and at the same time, how do you make the Sports Authority financially viable and still keep racing? And of the 4 ideas, one of them was have somebody else take over for $1 a year, pay for all expenses, and to run whatever racing they wanted to run there, but primarily for the standard race. And I think much to our surprise, I see Jeff Corral is with us today, and we'll talk later. Jeff has come forward, made the proposal. I'm certain for the standardbred owners who are here, they're happy to see he's working hard on it. It's not easy, but I will come to know why I think he has a very good chance of survival. So today, if I look back, I said, well, in the middle 80s, when I was involved with the sports complex, we had the 3 facilities. Giant Stadium, as we know, is gone. We had the racetrack, which was still at the height of success. And we had a new facility, and then the Brendan Byrne, now known as the Eyes facility. So if the Giant Stadium is gone, we do have a state-of-the-art football stadium. And I just bear in mind, if they have 30 to 35 events there a year, you might have 2.5 to, you wouldn't have 3 million people come. His attendance is down. So why do I think that Jeff Corral has a good chance that he can be successful with the Meadowlands Racetrack? And I won't describe much of what he's going to do, but one of the proposals he has, the concept he has, is to not race in the current facility, but to build a new, smaller facility on the backstretch. And as you look at the attendance, you see that perhaps 3,000, 3,500 people come out. So one of the laboring wars for Jeff is, how do I market to the non-core racing fans? And if you've been following it all in the press, you will note that part of our assignment was to revitalize Xanadu. And in December, we announced that the bank group that controlled the superstructure that stands there, they own the leasehold. The ground is owned by the New Jersey Sports Authority. We announced that the new developer will be 555 Realty Group. And 555 is the owner and operator of two similar type facilities. One is in West Edmonton, Canada, which is 5.2 million square foot of retail and entertainment space. And in Minneapolis, they have the Mall of America, which is 4.2. So part of our assignment in February was to go to Minneapolis, explore that facility, and come to a conclusion why we thought the 555 could be successful. The present superstructure has twice failed. Once, the first corporation, Mills, did not make it. The second one, Colony, they gave back the property to the banks. So here is why I think Jeff has a very good chance of being successful with his new concept. If he's able to pull all the pieces together he's working on, I would anticipate that his new facility can open before the Xanadu project. So let's, for argument's sake, sometime in 2012, 2013, whatever the time would be. We would anticipate that Xanadu could open in 2013. And as you all know, the Super Bowl is coming to New Jersey in 2014. My experience in business is when you have a big event, 2012, the new racetrack, 2013, the Xanadu project, 2014, the Super Bowl, you can market off of those. So the laboring hour, as I said, for Jeff, is that how does he market a new Meadowlands Racetrack? And back to why I think that's possible. At the present time, the Xanadu footprint is 2.2 million square feet, much smaller than the project in Minneapolis. One of the reasons why we haven't had any further public announcements as to what is happening is we are exploring ways how we can increase the size of that facility. And candidly, and we can't do it, if we could get it up to the size of the Mall of America, that'd be great, but that I do not believe at this time is possible. The Mall of America had an attendance of 40 million people last year. The Mall of America is a combination of retail and entertainment. And when you go into the mall and have a roller coaster ride, which, by the way, starts right where the home plate was in the old Minnesota Twins stadium, and you see what's transpiring, and then you listen to the facts and figures that you're told, and you know, always we have people with promotion, so we have to scale back a little bit and they told us the 40 million, I believe that might be accurate, but the one figure they gave us that really came through to me as being important was in the average shopping experience, if you go to a regular traditional retail mall, people spend 30 minutes. And if you go to one that has retail and entertainment, the nature of the Mall of America, people spend 3 hours. So if we accept for the moment that 40 million people have gone to the Mall of America on an annual basis, and we accept for the moment what the projection they told us on Monday when I met with the folks in the Mall of America, they anticipate 60 million people can come to the new Xanadu. Now, what will the new Xanadu look like? Well, the first thing is, I told nobody in New Jersey knows what a Xanadu is, so you got to change the name. So I can report to you that there'll be a name change. And as Governor Christie said, who would I be to criticize what the governor says? It is the ugliest building in New Jersey. And so the renderings that I have looked at, will not recognize what it looks like today. So that's two positives, and that's what we said. And it will be truly a entertainment center, concept of a water park, something that attracts the children of shoppers to want to go there. I can remember when Jimmy was a young fellow, my wife would take him shopping in Paramus. She never would tell him where he was going to go. And within about 2 blocks, he'd see, "We're going to Stearns." I hate going to Stearns. So he would always act up. But today, the reward, like they tell me, in the Mall of America is we're going to the mall and you can go on the roller coaster. If you're going in West Edmonton, you can go to the water park. So the reason I believe Xanadu is going to be successful is not because they're going to have some really good retail tenants, and I anticipate they will have some retail tenants that are not currently represented here in the Northeast, and some that are not represented in the United States. So I'm saying to you, Jeff, you're going to have a great opportunity to try to market to these folks that are coming there, in addition to your traditional core base. Having said that, the question has come up to various times, what's the status of the IZOD Center? I would answer that and say, I believe that, that the IZOD Center will function in concert with the new project currently known as Xanadu. Now, going back to the role of our committee, we are a committee of recommendation. We really don't have authority. We have, I think, the ability to present in a business fashion what the options are, and then the governor can make his decision. And that's basically what we have done as far as the Meadowlands Racetrack, Xanadu, and IZOD. So again, I believe that by October 2013, we will again have the crown jewels in New Jersey and the Meadowlands. They just will be different than the original crown jewels we had. If I can turn my attention to Monmouth Race Park, so I'm turning your attention to it. Originally, my information is correct. I believe it opened in 1947. It was owned by various members of the private sector. And there came a time when we determined at the Sports Authority, and Bob O'Kay was going to speak today about Atlantic City, but Bob was the CEO and I was the chairman at that time, that we perceived that whoever controlled Monmouth Racetrack could well control horse racing in the state of New Jersey. And we made a commitment to acquire that facility. And it somewhat went as follows. It almost reminds me of the job we have today. We didn't have any money, and we had to find a way of buying it. So we went to a meeting, and Mr. Hess was there, Leon Hess, who was the primary shareholder. And we made our proposal, and then we called time out, and he took us to a side room. The first thing he did, he dismissed Bob and said, "Bob, you can't be in here, you're a state employee." "I could stay," he told me. So he said, "What is it you want me to do?" And I said, "I want you to take $13 million of bonds on the vacant land, and we'll pay you off over time." He looked at me, made some kind of comment that wasn't most flattering about what he called the Hanson kind of notes that he had, but he agreed that he would do that. I might tell you that subsequently he was paid off. The next thing we did was I called Bob Ferguson, who was the CEO of, I think, First Fidelity at the time, and I said, "Bob, Sports Authority is going to need $30 million. I explained, "Well, you're going to get it first mortgage." He was a good banker, committed on the spot. You have it. And then I forgot that I hadn't called the governor. So bear in mind, the governor always has veto power what you do. He knew we were working on something, he knew exactly what it was. So I called the governor, and I took a big gulp, and I said, Governor, we just bought Monmouth Racetrack. You don't have to worry about the finance, we have it all lined up. You just have to sign off on the minutes. And the governor signed off on the minutes, and that's how Monmouth Racetrack became part owned by the Sports Authority. Well, fast forward, the fortunes of Monmouth have gone downhill, although we had an elite meet last year that was successful as far as I believe as the horsemen were concerned, and as far as the patrons were concerned. And it was somewhat successful for the sports complex, but the bottom line is last year there was a loss at the Monmouth Racetrack of approximately $6.5 million. Today is the day that the RFP is due back from people who would like to operate, in other words, people in the private sector who would like to operate Monmouth Racetrack. Again, that was a recommendation our committee made to the governor, and we're moving forward. And I am hopeful that we'll have multiple bids that the Sports Authority can review, and that we will once again have thoroughbred horse racing at Monmouth Park for the future. And if you've ever been to Monmouth Park, it's one of the beautiful racetracks in the country. So we're encouraged that there'll be a solution to doing that, but again, we're encouraged because the state of New Jersey, and that's really the mandate we had from the governor as far as get the Sports Authority out of the profit and loss business. That's not the proper role of government, and that's the direction that we're moving in. And the final piece that we did at our commission was to review matters in Atlantic City. And when we first started on that, the forecast for Atlantic City was down, and it continues at the present time to go down. But one of the groups that we talked to the McKinsey people. McKinsey does all kinds of review and market studies and observational recommendations for corporate America, including the casino industry. And they pointed out to us, which I guess many of us realized, that number one, the day tripper to Atlantic City, that business is being lost to the surrounding states. So you needed to develop a different business model. And when we further looked at it, and if you ever walk through any of the casinos, you find that the casinos are a little bit of their worst enemy. They wanted to get the patron in the facility and then not let them outside. And I remember when we went down on July 21st, because we were with the governor, I thought that they took us in and for security reasons left the floor of a casino, and we went down on the lower level, the basement level, and finally we found the boardwalk. I came to realize if you were someone staying in a hotel, that's about the way you could get to the beach. And so what we believe is the marketing has not been done in the proper fashion for Atlantic City. Las Vegas spends $100 million a year promoting Las Vegas. Atlantic City spent $4 million. So you need to look at, can marketing choose that? Can you make it a destination? That's the thesis in our report. You have to make it a destination for people to want to go there for reasons over and above gaming. In Atlantic City, there's a marina. Some people use it, but it's pretty well-kept secret. You got a great beach. You got a boardwalk. The problem with the boardwalk, you walk down the boardwalk, you can't see the ocean because someone from someplace put some mounds of dirt covered by some growth, and you can't see the beach. So the natural attributes of having one of the best beaches in New Jersey has never been marketed properly because the casinos wanted to keep the patrons in the facilities because that's where they make money. So we believe that you need to market, number one, safe and clean, and the perception is it's not safe and clean. So in the legislation that's been approved, which grants certain powers now to CRETA, which Bob will talk about, I believe, on one of your panels. We are working very closely with CRETA right now, with our commission and with the governor's office, to make sure it's safe and it's clean and it's perceived to be safe and to be clean. We are also working closely with them on the master plan, which creates the tourist district, and there are hearings being held on that, and I believe that's due to be voted upon on April 19th, the exact outline of what that tourist district will look like. I noticed an article in the paper yesterday about Atlantic City International Airport. It's very important to the future success of Atlantic City to have a first-rate airport. Because if you think about it, you can get the European business nonstop to come to Atlantic City to go to your safe and clean facilities before anybody else gets it. And yes, we have competition, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, but no due respect, lack of respect for what they have. You don't have a beach, you don't have a marina, you don't have the ocean. We have some natural ingredients that have never been marketed properly, in my opinion, for promoting Atlantic City. And the last item where my committee was involved, as most of you know, the Rebel project stopped. One of the major investment banks wrote off their investment, and the developer was having problems obtaining his financing. We, on the commission, interfaced with their investment banker, asked us if we would talk to some of the potential people who would buy the bonds, which I did. I hosted a meeting at my office, and some of them came there, some were on the phone, and they said, any chance we could talk to the governor? I said, I think I probably could arrange that. So Governor Christie got on the phone with various hedge funds, investment funds around the country, and spent 45 minutes on the phone talking to them. In the end, they asked him if New Jersey was really serious. He gave a flippant comment. He wouldn't spend so much time with them if they were not, and I didn't quote him exactly. He was a little stronger than that. But the end result was that the Rebel financing is closed. The project's on is under construction again. I believe it's June of 2012 that it will open. So that's a success. Some of the new legislation permits smaller hotels. If one looks to see how the economy's doing, you do not need to talk to an economist. Go to New York City on a Sunday morning, drive around and see how many cranes you see on buildings and what construction is. That's the real barometer. It's the same barometer you have to have in Atlantic City. You cannot have just one project. We crossed the barrier from finding new capital for Rebel, but what we need to do is continue to attract capital. There will be some facilities or some casinos that will not make it. When they said they won't make it, I noticed one was sold for $31 million the other day. In our business, we're in the value-add business. We're not in the gaming business, by the way. And that's a good value-add play. If someone buys a facility and come in with fresh capital and put it in, and make it attractive, market properly, that's probably a very good investment. So that's what we anticipate will happen in Atlantic City. So bottom line for our perspective, our commission, is that horse racing and gaming still face an uphill battle, but we believe they can be successful at the Meadowlands with a new racetrack, at Monmouth, both of which will be run by the private sector, and the comments I just made as far as Atlantic City. So thank you very much for being able to give a background of what we do, what we're doing, and Our commission ends on June 30th. I'm afraid that we might be working beyond that. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Anybody has any questions? Yes, sir.
Yes.
Could you stand up and...
Sure. Joe I. Race, Councilman, the Borough of Oceanport.
Right.
The commission put together a lot of information. Seemed to be glaringly missing from the report is any idea of slots, VLTs, or an all-out casino at the Meadowlands. You talked about Xanadu, you talked about the new, what the marketing is going to be, the new stadium, the Super Bowl coming. There seems to be, if that would come in there within 7 miles of Midtown Manhattan, with all the gaming coming up around the state, would be a great way for the state to make some money to support horse racing and also put some money in the hands of Atlantic City without the state being involved. Is there any thought to adding that to the report at some way, shape, or form?
Joe, I debated when I was going to make my remarks, do I talk about that in my direct remarks, or do I wait because I knew somebody would ask that question? The answer is, we looked at the question. And here was our determination. About 4 years ago, you had 50,000 people working in the gaming industry in Atlantic City, and it's down to 33,000 people. And so that was a factor in what we looked at. And so our conclusion was that let's see if there's a way. This is before we had the McKinsey report, by the way. Is there a way that you can revitalize gaming in Atlantic City? And as I said in my remarks, we believe there is if you market it in a different fashion. And the conclusion was the problem in the casino industry is and was acute. We must deal with it, and we must do something that we can try to change that within a 12-month period. And some of the comments I just made, I think we are helpful in changing it. So therefore, our report got boiled down to one small paragraph that said, at this time, we do not recommend any additional gaming outside of Atlantic City on all the things that you talked about. And that was our report. And being pragmatic, I think that the legislature was not in any mood to approve anything that's outside of Atlantic City, so we were practical. We first made a determination, and after we made it, it was really, even if we came out and recommended, which was not really consideration. Our consideration is what I just stated from a practical matter. And bear in mind, we don't have any authority, we don't have recommendation powers. But I believe that for the present time, there will not be any gaming that does not, in New Jersey that does not originate in Atlantic City. Any more? Otherwise, I'm getting off easy. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. This is the way we're going to proceed. As you can tell from the program, we have two panels. The first panel is going to come up now. And that is Bob Mulcahy, Chris Warwanka, Tom Carver, and Karen Milanowski. And I should call your attention to the fact that Senator Lesniak will not be here today. He emailed me last night, actually, and said that he told me he had double knee surgery, which he told me he was going to have done and would still be able to come here. But as it turns out, complications developed, and he has had to have 2 blood transfusions, and his doctors told him not to come today. So I know he had some interest in some of the subjects here, but he will not be here. But I think we have a great lineup for you. The way we're going to proceed, I'm going to moderate the first panel, who are coming up now, and they are going to speak for no more than 15 minutes, maybe a little bit less, to leave time for questions and answers. I will not give them a detailed bio presentation. You have that in your handout. And they're going to proceed. Bob, you're up there first. after the other, they will come up. We'll hold questions to the end. And I won't reintroduce everybody, but you know the first speaker will be Bob Mulcahy. And Bob is the president of Mulcahy Associates, and as you know, is the former president and CEO of the New Jersey Sports and Exposition Authority, and also had something to do with Rutgers Sports. Chris Waronka is the vice president and senior research analyst at Deutsche Bank. Tom Carver is the vice president of government affairs of High Tech Systems, and as you know, the former chairman of the New Jersey Casino Reinvestment Development Authority. And Karen Malinowski is the director of Rutgers Equine Science Center. So Bob's going to come up here first, and then we'll proceed with the other three speakers. Thanks. Bob.
Thank you, Rich. Rich and I go back a long way, probably longer than either of us want to admit, but it goes back in the 70s when I was in Trenton. And I guess what it proves, Rich, is if you stay around long enough, your paths continue to cross. I want to thank John Hanson for his belief in me to give me the opportunity to participate in this exciting exercise that has become known as the Hanson Commission. It's also nice to share the panel with two people that I have known for many years and have great respect for, Tom Carver and Karen Malinowski. We have done many things together and shared many successes and some heartbreaks. I go back to the time when I was chief of staff to Brendan Byrne when he began his second term, and I was with him the night the initial throw of dice was made by him at Resorts Casino in Atlantic City. So I was there when it opened. But you know, even in those days we had concerns, and the concerns were whether the government was capable of handling the growth that would come with the casinos. And unfortunately, it was a discussion and a debate between Steve Persky and the governor, and at that time, Persky prevailed. And I think if you looked at it in hindsight, reluctantly, Steve would say, we should have expanded it into a regional basis, because that's part of where we are today. If I were to describe what's happened in Atlantic City, and I'm spending a great deal of time there right now, it's like three silos: the city, the state, and the casinos. And in blunt language, everybody sucked every dollar they could out for as long as they could, and nobody thought about what was going to happen when it ran out. And 30 years later, it ran out. Casinos were in trouble. I think 6 of the 11 were in some state of receivership or bankruptcy. And as John indicated, you lost somewhere from 49,000 or 50,000 employees to now 33,000. And the revenues have taken a similar dip. And because nobody thought ahead as to what we were going to do, once you started to ring the state with casinos around from Delaware, Pennsylvania, New York, we lost the day trippers. The day trippers were what was funding the casinos. If you want to become a destination, you have to take the kind of vision and take the steps that you need to become a destination. First thing you got to do is be able to attract conventions. They didn't do a very good job of it. They didn't build the facilities to do it. And all of a sudden we reached the point where they were in trouble, and now they have to do something. A significant piece of what we looked at in Atlantic City related to the environment of the city. And I can tell you about one conversation that we had with the business administrator and with the city solicitor. And I raised two questions that day. One was, what are you going to do about the crime problem in Atlantic City? His answer to me was, there is no crime problem. So I said, well, there's a perception of a crime problem, and if you got a perception of a crime problem, and this was right after the individual who went down and parked his car and got murdered when he parked his car in the parking lot. I said, if you got a perception of it, you got to deal with it. And as we got into it, we began to understand the turf battles that go on in Atlantic City between the various agencies and within the agencies. Second question I asked was, you have a $30 million budget gap for next year. What are you going to do about it? Well, we'll just add to the luxury tax on the casinos. This is the kind of thinking that drove Atlantic City to where it is today. So how are we going to deal with this? Well, there were two pieces of legislation that were critical to the change. They're both known as S11 and S12. And Tom Carver can give you an awful lot of the background that I've talked about as to where we are. But I want to focus on a couple of things. S12 was the one that consolidated the Casino Control Commission, and one of the commissioners, Sharon Harrington, who I've known for a long time, is here today. Excellent person, knows what she's doing. And the other was the Attorney General's office. And what we did was shift the control, reduce employees. For example, they had 24-hour coverage of individuals watching them count the money on the casino floors. Well, with the computers today, and with casinos in trouble, you know they were going to watch every dollar they had. They had to. So it was sort of an anachronism that went back for 30 years and needed to be changed. So the second piece of legislation created a tourism district. It changed the responsibilities of the Casino Redevelopment, Casino Reinvestment and Development Corporation, better known as CREDA. It's given CREDA almost the powers of the tourism district, if you will, of running the tourism district, being responsible for what happens in it. I'm going to talk just a couple minutes about the powers of CREDA. First, to designate the tourism district. Secondly, to adopt and impose land use regulations. 3, to adopt and implement development and design guidelines. Adopt and implement initiatives that promote cleanliness, commercial development, and safety. Undertake redevelopment projects. Institute public safety improvements in coordination with the security and law enforcement personnel. There's a whole series of ways that that will take place by consulting with the city and other stakeholders. Right now, we're holding community meetings in each of the wards of the city to get the input from the people in the city. The tourism district will encompass all of what's known as the special improvement district and broaden it so that we can have the initiative to go from the ocean to the end of the casino area on the boardwalk back up to Gardner's Basin and include Bader Field. We will create a tourism district advisory commission, and after 2 years audit the plan to determine its effectiveness and make necessary changes. We'll oversee redevelopment and implementation of the tourism district master plan. We will devote all available assets and revenues to the tourism district and community development in Atlantic City. As you know, the governor has made the statement, with the exception of the projects that are in the pipeline, all the money that's created from these districts will go back to Atlantic City for improvement there. What's happened is that over the years, there's about $1.8 billion, and an awful lot of it, for political reasons, has been given to other cities and areas of the state. We'll consult with the city and other governmental units in developing and design guidelines and land use regulations, and we'll have the right to approve any city designation in the tourism district. The point is, you're going to have control. And what's going to happen is the creation of the tourism district will be the responsibility of CREDA. They will take it over on the 19th, or a designation on the 19th. That's the statutory deadline. We will also take over the Atlantic City Convention and Visitors Bureau. That will be incorporated into CREDA. So CREDA will become the all-powerful super body, if you want, responsible for changing the culture and the environment of Atlantic City. So it's a significant change. It was a recommendation of the committee that somehow we had to get control of what was happening there and convince the casinos that they had a responsibility to participate in the master plan which they're doing, and we're going to have both a marketing master plan, which is the responsibility of the casinos, and a development master plan, which is the responsibility of CRETA, so that they will mesh. And for example, the so-called $30 million subsidy that the casinos had given to racing will go back into marketing the city. As John spoke, he talked about the comparison between Las Vegas and Atlantic City. You realize that for $5 million, you're not going to market very much of anything. So that is a major change. It's a major change in how we operate in New Jersey to try and fix the problem. And I think that for Atlantic City to succeed, this had to be done. We had looked at various options and had come back to the conclusion that I talked about 30 years before, that we needed some outside help to try and accomplish the mission of making the casinos have a chance to be successful. I want to make a couple of other comments. When John talked about Monmouth Park and racing, Bob Brennan was trying to buy the Monmouth Park. And when John talked about the fact that we had to protect our racing, we felt that we had to protect it because he was going to buy it, and we felt that that was not going to be good for the Sports Authority because he made some remarks that were not very encouraging about what he would do to the racing and the Sports Authority when he got Monmouth Park. So I go back a long way. I've had a lot of experience with these things. Seems like all these things come around, but I value the opportunity to have had a voice in what we say and do. And as the panel goes on, I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, I'm Chris Waronka from Deutsche Bank. I'll try to keep, my comments are somewhat brief and try to keep it focused on the finance side of things. I want to thank Rich for asking me to come. It's my first time doing this. And then I guess Rich says that our topic is state of New Jersey gaming industry and how did we get here, where are we going, and I thought one of the things that was interesting when I thought about that was how did we get here? And you heard earlier, obviously there have been some mistakes made in the past, but I don't think everything is necessarily the state of New Jersey's fault. I mean, maybe it's more about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I mean, expanded gaming in Pennsylvania wasn't really something that we could have prevented, right? It's something we kind of have to react to and adapt to, and same thing holds true for Aqueduct and whatever else may get thrown at us, because you probably know almost every state in the country is considering some form of gaming, and so it's likely there's going to be more, not less, both within our state and others, and I think that's going to be interesting to follow. I know your second panel is going to go into some more detail on some of the specific topics, but I thought I'd hit a few things that I see in my everyday business and some thoughts on those. In terms of Atlantic City, it really is more of an opportunity than a threat. I think at this point, 5 years ago, it was a threat, and all of the things we feared kind of came true, from smoking ban to Pennsylvania, more development there, table games, and more things to come with Aqueduct and others. And unfortunately, again, as pointed out a little while ago, money is needed to fix the problems, and time is needed to fix the problems, and we always have time, even though it's frustrating to wait, but we don't always have money, and I think that's the issue. When we think about the airport and the infrastructure and the marketing, those are all things that need a lot of time and money, and there aren't any easy answers. But just to echo some of the earlier comments, I mean, I cover hotel and resort markets, and not just Las Vegas, but other markets that are destinations that don't have casinos, and whether it's Florida or Arizona, California, it all starts with the airport. If people can't get there, it's a huge problem. And I think a city like Nashville is an interesting case study because they don't have casinos there either. They have one very large convention hotel, the Opryland. They have some attractions downtown, but Nashville is not a humongous city in the way that a Las Vegas or another market is. What they do have is a good airport. They have a lot of airlift in there. They have a lot of low-cost airlift in there, and that's a city that it's not a perfect comparison to Atlantic City, but it's interesting that the airport was really the key, and so I think that things are going to start there. I think the good news, though, is that when you look at Revel, and 6 months ago, a year ago, no one thought this could go forward. Everybody thought it was dead, wasn't salvageable, wasn't financeable, and now it's moving forward. And there's obviously still a lot of questions that have to be answered, and we'll see what the performance, how the performance is, and how it impacts the rest of Atlantic City. But it's somewhat encouraging that it was able to get done. I think there are a lot of creative solutions that were considered and went into that. I can tell you, working for banks, banks lend money, that's what they do. If they don't lend money, they can't make money. And obviously lending is different today than it was 3 and 5 years ago, but if viable plans are introduced, things can come together. I think it takes longer now than it used to, which is probably a good thing in the long term. But the other thing to keep in mind from a financing standpoint, with interest rates as low as they are, we don't know how long they're going to stay there. They're low today. The required rates of return are just inherently lower. Put in perspective, again, my business that I look at every day, I see hotels routinely selling for prices that are giving the owners a 4 or 5% return, which 5 and 6 years ago was unheard of. You would have needed a 7, 8, 9, or even 10% return, but because of where interest rates are, that required rate of return is lower. And I think that may help as we think about some of the projects we're working on here. They're not all going to pencil out, but they may pencil out a little bit better with the interest rate picture. So, I think what it means and what I see from working with our bankers is you have to have a viable plan. Plans today for development, no matter where they are, get much more scrutiny than ever before. Financial projections are what they are. Sometimes they come true, sometimes they don't. But you have to have, I think when you move forward with plans, you have to have some bulletproof reasoning behind them. Things get questioned a lot harder in due diligence sessions. I can tell you from personal experience. And I think I wanted to touch a little bit on internet gaming. Needless to say, it's an absolutely huge opportunity. And for now, it appears as though it's kind of off the table here in New Jersey. I think it'll come back at some point. As you know, there's federal legislation being considered in different forms, and there's other states that are looking at it, Nevada, Florida, usual suspects. This is another case where folks are going to have to work together from the state and federal level to make something happen. We can't lose this opportunity. The money right now is going straight over to these internet poker companies that are based in the UK. The U.S. and the states are obviously getting not a penny of it, and that's got to change. And every day that goes by is lost opportunity. And I don't know exactly what the answers are. I think we're going to need some kind of ssolution that involves both the federal and the state level. And historically, that hasn't worked well. We're going to have to get creative here. But it's a huge opportunity, and it's something that the good news is it doesn't require a lot of investment. This isn't going out and building new buildings and getting financing. This is a matter of finding a way to regulate and collect money over the internet. And it's 2011, and the world operates on the internet. The gaming industry operates on the internet, and I'm not convinced that if we get some more proliferation of the internet gaming, I'm not convinced that it's going to have a material negative impact on the land-based casinos. I think in a lot of ways it's a different customer. We have to start capturing that. And again, it's not just a New Jersey issue; it's an every state issue and a federal issue. And but I think it's not going to happen if we don't come to some kind of collective agreement on it, whether that's a federal tax that gets remitted back to the states in some percentage or something like that. It doesn't seem as though we're going to be able to move forward with 50 different state proposals on internet gaming, and they're all going to regulate it differently, they're going to tax it differently. It's not going to work. I think it really has to be a top-down approach with some financial benefit to the states and maybe some state-based enforcements and regulations, but it really has to come from the federal level. I think that's ultimately where it's going to go. So that was really all I want to say.
Thank you very much. I'm a member of that group that John spoke about before, and I have to tell you, in all honesty, that people who talk glowingly about the golden years aren't in them. Believe me. I have to tell you, in all frankness, for the last 25 years, I first went to Atlantic City in 1984. Having run this little enterprise down here on the Turnpike, Newark International Airport is now Newark International Airport. For 25 years, I've tried to take the perspective of looking at Atlantic City from New Jersey perspective and looking at New Jersey from an Atlantic City perspective. That's a little bit like being Philip Nolan, the man without a country. But it's a necessity, and very frankly, sitting here today and listening to what is being said makes me think how right that was, that perspective. Twice in the past 25 years, Atlantic City has made some progress. First time was when Jim Florida became governor. And I've said this publicly many, many times. I don't mean to embarrass him because now he has company at that pinnacle. But we made progress because he told us before he took office when we met with him. I represented all the owners of the casinos at the time. And we met with him at our office over the 7-Eleven on Morris Avenue and Atlantic Avenue in Atlantic City, and explained to him if we were allowed to do certain things, new games, new approaches, new floor space, etc., we predicted the revenue stream that would be predicted. And every one of them was minuscule compared to what we actually did. We talked about 24-hour gaming and everything else, and ultimately we succeeded in getting those things. The one thing we didn't get, that we fought so hard to get because the potential was so great, was sports wagering. New Jersey received a one-year window to decide on its own, the only state in the union. We got permission from the House Judiciary Committee to have a one-year window to decide within the state if we would have sports wagering, and it was not allowed to be put on the ballot for a lot of reasons that aren't important right now. But as a result of that, we didn't get sports wagering, which would have been our insurance policy. Because what is happening to us now, we knew would happen to us. We couldn't convince a lot of people that these days would come. We didn't predict the fall off in the economy, but we did predict the regional competition will be here, and we need something to fight it off. We no longer have that. By the way, as an aside, just think if we had sports wagering today, the over and under is to whether or not will Donald O'Rooney. You know? This is a tough crowd. I'm glad to see my former colleague and predecessor, and Nick Gamato and I followed each other in varieties of jobs, and he could be up here making the same speech that I'm making today. But twice we made some progress. But this time, starting with John Hanson and Bob McKay, and I have to, if I can, articulate the magnitude of what these men have done. And I naturally give all the credit to Chris Christie, but I also want to say Steve Sweeney and John Berzachelli had major roles in this process also to get that legislature to vote on these major changes, which frankly, for the first time ever, have put in place the tools that are necessary to accomplish what Bob talked about. The tools. The Atlantic City government doesn't function. It's as simple as that. You know, it's a difficult thing to say when you're in the middle of the process and you're standing in the middle of the town to say that, but I've said it before in other words, but it doesn't function. And it doesn't function on the level that it should. And Atlantic City can't progress without the direct continued involvement of the state of New Jersey. And the tragedy for 25 years is once this industry was deposited on Atlantic City, just deposited there with no roadmap, no guidance, no tolerance even from official New Jersey at that point, that the things that are being talked about and will be, in my judgment, accomplished in some manner, shape, or form today could have been happening for the past 25 years and should have been. And with many of the things that John said, many of the things that Bob said are so accurate and true. And I'll paraphrase, if I may, Kevin DeSanctis, who is the fellow who is building the new Rebel. Kevin's a former state trooper, the state of New Jersey, by the way. Wonderful, wonderful guy. I think one of the great additions to the casino industry in Atlantic City for the following reason. He has said publicly many times, and this is an accurate statement, the industry has never accepted the town, and the town has never accepted the industry. And that is the key to any progress that we're about to make, and I think we will make it. There's some very positive signs in Atlantic City despite the downturn. Number one of which is the thing that John mentioned, investment is coming to Atlantic City. I'm going to take time out at the end just to describe a few things that the CRDA is already on the way doing. Bob laid out in an exemplary manner the detail of what has to be taking place and who's going to do it. But there's some things already happening that we had in the pipeline that I think are going to make major differences. So on this cusp of doing things in progress, I'll give you one example when I say the Atlantic City government doesn't function. For the past 5 years, when I first went down to Atlantic City, Dick Cody asked me to go down there sometime around October of 2005, I think it was. And I went down, and we knew many, many years that the police department wasn't doing what it should do. It was a great response department, but not a great preventive department. And I had personal experiences with major strikes and labor disputes and whatnot to see that happen over the years. But we met with the then Attorney General Ann Milgram. We met with Rick Fuentes, a great, great leader of the state police. And we sat down with the then mayor of Atlantic City. We had 4 in the few years that I was there. And the chief of police. And we discussed how to bring, I'm going to quote Rick on this, how do we bring the Atlantic City Police Department into the 21st century? Their equipment is outdated, their procedures are outdated, their functions were outdated. And one of the things that we decided is that the CRDA would set aside some $3 million to invest in all new equipment, computers and cars, which they don't have. Most police forces in all your towns have computers in their cars. It takes them 7 to 10 seconds to check on something that would take half hour maybe in Atlantic City to do. Minor, not minor, but very significant police work, but done in an appropriate manner. Crime tracking capabilities. They didn't know where the crimes were taking place in Atlantic City. Now they had some idea, obviously, because some were higher in some neighborhoods than others, but they had no ability to literally be a modern police force. 5 years ago, we set that money aside. It's still there. And it's still there. It's going to change, by the way, but it's still there because during that time, Ann Milgram nor anyone else was able to get the leaders of the Atlantic City Police Department to say, we will change our procedures to begin this process. And it got to the point so bad that a week or two before the election, the last election, Ann told me personally, I'm taking over the Atlantic City Police Department because I can't put up with it anymore. Well, that's changing. That's changing. There's new leadership in Atlantic City and the police department, and I think good leadership, and I think that money will be wisely invested. But it's a foundation for what everything is being talked about. Clean and safe. Clean and safe. The CRDA has several projects on the drawing boards being actively talked about. They're going to take some time, but they are to basically change the entire core of Atlantic City. An arts district. I've never seen so much interest in something that we announced that attracted so much interest. Calls from all over the country about an arts district. And we know from experience that people who are artists come in and they are really the instigators, the catalysts of change in a community. By themselves, they begin that process. So there will be an arts district in Atlantic City. There will be an Eds and Meds card in Atlantic City. And what that is a several block area on Atlantic Avenue, by the way, Atlantic City's front door, not the boardwalk. Had this debate for 25 years, and my answer was nobody rows in, they all drive in. So their perception of what the casino industry is formed by the time they get there, about Atlantic City. So anyway, we're going to change, and I said, forgive me the use of the personal pronoun, I'm lapsing into the CRDA in this process. And I hope Bob is going to be a major part of this effort, frankly. will change Atlantic City to its core. We have to change Atlantic Avenue. It's our front door, and it's just a dummy. It can't stay that way. And Pacific Avenue is worse. It can't stay that way. There's going to be a major investment conference, and forgive me for jumping around, but as I recall, some of these things that we did are actively underway. On the 14th of April, there will be a major investment conference at the convention hall run by the CRDA. We're going to announce publicly at that time, these are public issues that I'm talking about, but they're only really locally known. We're going to announce it to the ULI, Urban Land Institute, people who will be coming from the entire region to talk about Atlantic City and what we see happening and what the investment possibilities are. There will also be a square block which is going to be put up for public consumption and public bidding, which is directly across the street from Angela's Restaurant. I hope some of you are familiar with Atlantic City. There's a parking lot now, a square, big block parking lot, very seldom used, owned by the CRDA, managed by the SJTA, which will be put up for investment. Things are happening. Now, we talk about the focus. And by the way, give me the book. If I go too long, forgive me. Okay. I want to be short, but there's so much to talk about. Because Atlantic City is a state treasure. It's our treasure. It's not their treasure. It's not just those guys down there in South Jersey or Atlantic City. It's your treasure also, because of its potential to be an international destination. An international destination. We'll talk about the airport in a second, but an international destination. And I would submit to you that it is the only attraction in the state of New Jersey that would actually entice someone to get on a plane in Frankfurt or Paris or London and come to New Jersey to see and stay here. Not sleep here and then go over to New York. Come to New Jersey, stay here, and see what we have. That's the potential we're talking about. The airport. Forgive me, it's the last thing. What is happening in South Jersey, where I believe, frankly, the future growth, economic growth of the state of New Jersey is going to take place in the South for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is we have the best place to grow because we don't have a lot of things down. But I'm actively now, and have been when I was at the CRDA, even deeply more involved because I was on the inside, not the outside, but we're working together, varieties of agencies and private businesses to create an aviation research and technical park attached to the FAA Center, which is 12 miles outside of Atlantic City. It's also part of the airport. The whole campus is one. If we are successful and working very hard towards that extent, I believe that we can create an epicenter for the future of aviation in southern New Jersey, where major companies, the Boeings, the Honeywells, the rest of them will be there. Other businesses will be created as a result of this. Now, what that means is two things. Number one, it's great for the economy of the state of New Jersey, but secondly, it will create an entirely different prospect and concept and dynamic in the southern part of the state. There'll be new people in there. And by the way, we're talking about several thousand, between 2,000 and 5,000 jobs just at the center. But the potential for more business is there. These are not jobs being maids and bartenders in casinos. These are high-paying technical positions to do research and engineering. We anticipate having some of the great institutions of the country as part of this amalgamation of business, government, and academia as part of this. The second thing it will do is it will create an entirely new market for the casino industry, which doesn't exist. Basically our market, because they will be here. Now the important thing for the airport. By the way, that airport, aeronautically, and I say this with all due respect to my former domain over here in the Turnpike, is superior aeronautically to Newark Airport. For the simple reason, two simple reasons. It has a 10,000-foot runway, and more important than that, it controls its own airspace. If you go to Atlantic City to take an aircraft, you get on the plane, you taxi out, you take off. If you're coming from someplace to Atlantic City, you fly in and you land. There are no delays. There are no delays because it's not part of a subservient system as Newark is. Well, Newark is part of that. I don't know if it's still to the extent now, but we were third in line behind LaGuardia and Kennedy for airspace in the old days. But we still share that airspace, and also Teterboro is involved in it. Now, with all due respect, this is the greatest system of airports the world will ever know, created by the Port Authority right here in northern New Jersey. But Atlantic City can be a dynamic airport. Someday, I think for the good of the state, handling between 6 and 10 million passengers a year. Hard road to hoe. Port Authority is better equipped financially and in talent and in resources to carry out that goal than is the SJTA, who does a remarkably good job. But the school agency, which very frankly, I wrote the original part of the statute to create it. We needed it down there, and it's done a great job. But if the choice will be made, Port Authority has more resources. So the only thing I really want to leave you with is that there's a great potential. The focus has changed. The focus has changed from the casino industry to Atlantic City. The casinos are a part of Atlantic City, but they aren't Atlantic City. And it's been said here before, said by John, said by Bob, Atlantic City must be the attraction. People have to want to go to Atlantic City. They'll end up at the Borgata or Caesars or some other place, but we've got to get them there first. The industry is belatedly beginning to recognize this. I'll tell you a quick story before I sit down. Years ago, Steve Wynn, who was a good friend over the years, used to say to me, Tom, look, we're at the stage now. This is how far back this goes. It shows you how little we've come since. We now get the gamblers to come to Atlantic City. The second phase of this development is to get the occasional gambler. But the third step, where we must get to and where we want to be, is to have the non-gamblers come to Atlantic City. And guess what? That's exactly where we are today. But as a result of the work of John and Bob, the governor, and others, I think, frankly, we now have the tools to accomplish that goal. Thank you.
Typical academic. Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank the school and the Hall Institute for hosting today's forum, and I certainly want to thank Richard Lee for asking me to present today. While the purpose of this forum is certainly to address gaming in the state of New Jersey and from a horse perspective, horse racing, I've been asked by Rich and the Hall Institute to also address the often forgotten and complicated connection between the racing and non-racing segments of the horse industry in New Jersey and their collective impact on traditional agriculture and open space. I think something that's very important to all of us in the most densely populated state in the nation. This is not new for us. The Equine Science Center has been engaged in the discussion of the future of horse racing since 2003, when it hosted the unprecedented roundtable discussion with horse racing industry leaders from around the tri-state region in collaboration with the New Jersey Department of Agriculture. We were further motivated by the continued local debates over the future of horse racing in New Jersey, and at the request of and the partnership with public and private entities, the center conducted in 2006 the first economic impact analysis of the horse industry in the state of New Jersey, which was published in 2007. I'm going to take you through some of the results of this study. There were several purposes, first and foremost. One was, obviously, money talks in the state of New Jersey. The economic impact had never been analyzed for our industry. We also very wisely knew that the equine industry in New Jersey, in comparison to other major industries, could not compare economically with those. But something that is so important to New Jersey residents is the land and the protection of that land. And even in these tough economic times, the voters in New Jersey continue to find the preservation of farmland and open space to be extremely critical. We also wanted to begin regular benchmarking of the industry, to profile all components of the state's equine industry, And selfishly, with an ulterior motive, we also wanted to provide insight into the number of dollars, jobs, and agricultural acres that would be in jeopardy if racing were to leave the Garden State. Okay. What we found were that there were 42,500 equine animals in the state. We are the most densely populated state in the nation with people and also with horses. There are 7,200 operations. 10% of those are racing related. Of those horses, 30% are directly related with racing activities. And interestingly, to show the importance of harness racing in the state of New Jersey, by a margin of 2 to 1, the standardbred population is greater in New Jersey than the thoroughbred population. The industry, the assets of the horses, the land, the buildings, including the racetracks, was valued at $4 billion. The industry in total generates $1.1 billion annually. And if we look at the breakout, excluding racetracks, the racing-related operations, and this is a point, ladies and gentlemen, that a lot of other people doing economic impact evaluations of the horse racing industry forget. It's not just about the racetracks, it's about the breeding and training farms as well. $280 million of economic impact due to those operations. The non-racing related operations were valued at $262 million, and other horse owners who do not own operations also contribute $118 million to the picture. Those 4 racing venues, which were separately interviewed and surveyed by the Equine Science Center in 2006, generate $500 million of annual economic impact. Now, if we move to another important aspect of the industry, the numbers of jobs. 13,000 jobs are generated by the equine industry. 7,000 of those are directly related to racing. Now, very important, very visionary piece of this economic impact analysis was, what about the land, which is a very critical piece for New Jersey. Those 7,200 operations, ladies and gentlemen, are on 176,000 acres. Now, New Jersey has lost from the period of 1996 to 2003, 40,000 acres of farmland that is left in the state. There are only 790,000 acres left. So those equine operations are responsible for 20% of the agricultural acres that are left in existence in the Garden State. Another thing to look at is the continued preservation of that farmland because of the horse industry. If we look at this pie chart, 55% of those equine operations, when asked, had been in a previous agricultural use before they became horse farms. And so, again, if it were not for the horse industry, a lot of these farms that were either potato farms, dairy farms, poultry farms, they would be in development and not in agriculture. We also, if we looked at the number of operations, the percentage of the size of them, and as you would expect in this small state, the majority of the equine operations are small. However, 7% of the operations are on land of 50 acres plus. Now, we certainly can suggest that the majority of these large properties are not due to the pleasure or sport industry. They are due to breeding and training centers that exist here in the state. Also importantly, we have on the left certainly our equine facility acres of 176. But we also in this study looked at the traditional agricultural acres that do not have horses on them, but continue to be in existence to provide food and bedding for those 42,000 horses in the state. And that was 46,000 acres. So if we combine the 176 with the 46,000 acres, 222,000 acres in New Jersey are supported by the horse industry. Now, looking at that number, we have approximately 30% of the agricultural land left is here because of horses. And again, 6,000 of those acres are directly due to racing. Now, this is a busy slide, but the bottom line here is, repeatedly during the last decade, we have been in meetings and sessions with the Department of Agriculture and testimony where the question has constantly come up. How much of the farmland preservation program, which is extremely important for the state of New Jersey, how many of those 190,000 acres are in horse farms? And so no one had the answer for that, including the State Ag Development Committee. And so the Equine Science Center took upon themselves the task of finding out the answer. And what we have here, folks, is a state of New Jersey map by county, and what is depicted is the percentage of preserved equine acres out of the total equine acres. And so while you see in Morris County 40%, Monmouth County about 18%, overall in the state, the number of equine acres that are in the farmland preservation program, i.e. protecting them from development, is very, very small. In the 2009 paper that we posted on the Hall Institute website, thank you, gentlemen and all, for helping us with that, we assessed in that white paper the impact of slots on states that have them in racing and traditional agriculture. And we assessed the state of horse racing at that time to be the following. The current business model, as we've heard from Mr. Hanson this morning, is no longer viable. Owners and breeders, ladies and gentlemen, continue to still be reluctant to invest in horses and land and farms in the state of New Jersey because of the uncertainty of the future of horse racing in the Garden State. And again, this certainly is an assessment or an indication of the confidence level that people have. We certainly know it's a no-brainer that parimutuel wagering cannot support our person or improve our infrastructure. But interestingly, we also found that there was tremendous growth in the off-track and internet wagering opportunities for people. Now, this is a slide that I promised Jim Simpson, who's on the next panel, that give him a wonderful lead-in. In the last couple of days, via telephone and other methods, I wanted to put up two tables for you, both of which are indications of the trends, the confidence in the breeding industry in three of our top harness racing states. One being, of course, New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania, for the periods 2003 through 2010. And what we see here in 2003 in New Jersey, we had 1,000 plus registered animals registered for our sire stakes program. That increased to 774 in the year 2010. So New Jersey at this period of time is on a downward trend with the confidence level of breeding standardbred horses in our state. New York, on the other hand, began in 2003 with 672 horses nominated for their sire stakes, and then in 2010 had 1,064. If we move on to, again, a neighboring state, Pennsylvania, in 2003 there were 1,250 registered animals, and in 2010 Pennsylvania had 1,700 last year. So Pennsylvania and New York are growing in their sire stakes program. Another way to look at this, people like to look at money. And this is the first distributions for those same three states, the years 2007 through 2010. New Jersey in 2007 was roughly $7.5 million in sire stakes monies offered. In 2010, $6.2 million. New York in 2007 was a little over $15 million, and last year was $19.5 million, growing. Pennsylvania began in 2007 with a $4 million sire stakes program. Last year it was almost $13 million. And I'm sure Mr. Simpson will talk about the positive effect that the increase of revenue coming from the racinos in Pennsylvania has had on the breeding program. What does New Jersey stand to lose? Why are we so passionate about this? Why do we care about the future of horse racing in the industry? If racing-related training and breeding farms leave New Jersey, one of our premier agribusinesses left in the Garden State will be put in severe danger. We stand to lose $780 million of annual economic impact, 7,000 jobs, $110 million in taxes, and importantly, 56,000 acres of working agricultural landscape and open space. And I'll tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, the preservation of rural open space can be as a hot-button political issue as jobs. And so acres for us is extremely important in the garden space. We also worry about the traditional agricultural interests, those hay and grain farmers who really have been advocates in support of the horse industry and the horse racing industry because they know that is the bread and butter for them and their future. And the services to all horse enthusiasts in New Jersey is put at risk. And one must remember that there can only be so much of a collapse of the critical mass in specialized services for all segments of the industry. And this could result in increased prices for the top shelf vet clinics that we have, feed and supply stores, but it also could mean how much of a hit can the New Jersey Equine Clinic take, the Mid-Atlantic Equine Clinic take, before it needs to close its doors. And so we don't know the answer to that question, but those owners of those businesses certainly are concerned. And then that impacts directly all of the horse industry in New Jersey because those services cease to exist. Another point about the land, again, only 8% of the total acres in the farmland preservation program in New Jersey, and only 7% of the total acres in equine operations are in farmland preservation. Of that 176,000 acres, ladies and gentlemen, that leaves over 163,000 acres vulnerable to future development. 34,000 of those equine acres are directly related to racing. And so that's about what farmland what we've lost in the total amount of farmland for almost a decade in New Jersey. That actually could be lost if racing is not preserved. Some thoughts, closing thoughts, and moving towards sustainability of the horse industry. We certainly need a new business model. Certainly would hope that Mr. Brown might speak to that in his presentation. The horse racing, training, and breeding industry needs a stable source of revenue to bring that confidence level back. There needs to be the strategic opening of off-track wagering outlets. And something that I've wrestled with many times is the industry needs to define itself. What are we? And if we look at the horse industry versus something like the food industry in New Jersey, we have a long way to go. We also need to accommodate the next generation of fans while satisfying our current customers. We need to invest in marketing, the creation of our racing brand, what are we going to look like, the application of new technology, not only to assess past performances of our horses, but also to make those wagers. There's been a lot of tracks around the country, around the world, that have been looking at new innovative wagers. We also recommended in that 2009 paper there needs to be a reduction in the cost of regulation of horse racing in New Jersey and a reduction in the cost of the New Jersey Racing Commission. capital improvements need to be done, and something that Equine Science Center certainly is an integral part of, is the integrity of racing. That product that we put out there, we need to make sure that it is a product of high integrity. And we also need to care for the well-being of that equine athlete, because if we're trying to get new fans to the track, a lot of people need to understand that racehorses love to race. We're not making them race. So I feel, and with my colleagues at the Equine Science Center, that the racehorse breeding, training, and racing industry in New Jersey is worth saving. Horse racing is, ladies and gentlemen, the economic driving engine of the entire horse industry in the state of New Jersey. And for all of us who live in New Jersey, and some of you who may have come from out of state on our roads this morning, we like the quality of life that the horse industry brings to every single resident of the state of New Jersey. I thank you for your attention, and we'll be happy to answer questions.
What a disciplined panel, right on time and everything else. We have plenty of time for questions, but before I open it up, I just wonder whether there might be some comments among the panel members, whether there's some things that Bob said that Tom didn't like, or something that Tom said that Bob might observe, or something from our investment industry. Bob?
I think what you heard this morning, you had two major facilities in New Jersey that stood out. And I remember Governor Kane saying at one point in the 80s or 90s that the Meadowlands, the development of the Meadowlands, was one of the two most important things that happened in the last quarter century of New Jersey. If you look at the lessons that we've sort of talked about this morning, you look at Atlantic City, they let it go, and you have to recreate the vision. And if you look at the Meadowlands, there was a vision. We created a harness industry that was the best in the world. And what happened? Leaders came in the middle 2000s in government and decided they wanted to take it apart. Now, in 1998, we had passed legislation to create off-track wagering parlors. Only one was ever built and in place in the next, I guess, 10 years. That was in Woodbridge. The net bottom line of the Woodbridge facility is $5 million a year. There was the capacity to build, the Meadowlands had the capacity to build 9 of them. Think about it. If they had done that, you would have had a much better chance to offset the downturn that happened. The second thing is, with all due respect, the negotiation in the arena took a $20 million stream of revenue out of the Sports Authority and replaced it with a nebulous clause, I think section 6.2 in the lease, which said that 1/2 of the imputed income from sales tax and income tax would be funneled back to the Sports Authority, and they had figured on that number being $63 million, which means that the Sports Authority would have gotten $31 million. But it was never put down specifically, they never got the money. So if you think about what happens when you lose your vision and you lose what you want to get done, you got two prime examples right here of what happened to major industries in this state, because at that time the political leadership didn't understand what they meant to the state. And I say that with all due respect to Governor McGreevy, who sent his people up there to tear it apart, unfortunately. Then you go back here, and I've worked with 7 or 8 governors in my career. And I can say one thing about Governor Floria, and we worked together on several issues. If you gave him a briefing, he read it, and he was prepared to talk to you about it, and he would give you a straightforward answer. We had a bill in 1991 which redid the debt for the Sports Authority. It created the money for Rutgers Stadium, and created the money for the Atlantic City Convention Center. And I went in and spoke to him, and I asked him where he stood on the bill. He was very straightforward. He said, Bob, if you get it passed, I will sign it, but I'm not going to come out for it. And we were able to get bipartisan support for it from both Governors Byrd and Kane. And to his credit and to his word, when it passed, he signed it. So we've had leaders who understood where these industries should take their place in the society of New Jersey. And then we blow it because we get caught up in political fights. And people get lost in where the vision is and what we should do. I also, I want to commend Tom Lacento, who heads the Standard Rate owners. Over the some 20 years that I dealt with all of them, they were stand-up people. They kept their word. They cared about the business they were doing. They cared about it surviving and were willing to make concessions. That's what we need when these things happen and we get in an economic downturn. The unions have to make concessions for Jeff Garrett. If they don't, there won't be any more racing there. And then there won't be any jobs. So you get to the real conclusion. What do you want? Do you want the jobs, or do you want racing? So I make these comments, and I think one of the things that we've done here this morning, particularly Tom and myself, have tried to be very straightforward about where we see these things and why they happen, because you have to be instructive in terms of learning from your experiences and where you go in the future. So I offer those comments. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Maybe we'll go to questions before we go back to panel members. Must be some observations or critiques or questions or from the audience. Maybe just stand up in your name and...
Ed Wengren, New Jersey Farm Bureau. So this is going to be an odd question. The one thing I didn't hear about in both the Meadowlands and the Atlantic City is moving the people around, the transportation component. You all mentioned European travelers and getting people to come here and visit. They don't drive cars. They count on a public transportation system. How are you going to get the people from the airport 12 miles outside of Atlantic City into Atlantic City in a quick, convenient manner? When you talk about the Xanadu and sports entertainment complex, racetrack, stadium, you have a train that comes in now, but how do you get the people from the entertainment venue to the racetrack on the other side with a stop at the football stadium to tour the museum in a way that's convenient and comfortable so that people want to experience the venue? How do you move them from one end of the boardwalk to the marina, to the airport and back? Those are sort of my questions. Have you guys been looking at that kind of investment?
Very good question in both areas. Just after I got to Atlantic City, we decided to do, by the way, if you want to get anything done in government, and I mean this not sincerely, you ask forgiveness, not permission. Otherwise, forget about it, as far as I'm concerned. We decided, based on the economics, I hate to, can you hear me? Based on the projections at the time, you have to remember, we were faced at that point with $25 billion in new construction had been announced. There's going to be a new massive casino in the Marina District, MGM's casino, a new city center out there actually. Several new casinos in town, including Rebel, plus expansions. And a doubling of our workforce from 40,000 at that time to 80,000 a day. And we needed millions of people, new people to make that work. So we undertook, I went up to the DOT and I said to Chris Calori, who was then the commissioner, I said, I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse. We have to do, never been done in the state before or since, a transportation master plan for the next 25 years for southern New Jersey. The core will begin in Atlantic City, but for southern New Jersey, and it has to be combined with housing and land use in one fell swoop. We won awards for this, by the way. The bottom fell out between that and that. However, in that plan, was in that master plan was a complete change in the transportation systems of Atlantic City, including a major transportation center at the airport, which would be connected to the casinos directly by what they call public-private transportation. It's actually a system where if you get in a car, you press in your destination, that's where you go. No stops, you go to that destination. It's all laid out in Atlantic City. Atlantic City will need a system like that someday if we are successful. As far as the Meadowlands is concerned, I have to tell you a very quick story. I was an advocate, it wasn't my plan, but I was a strong advocate of running the New York City subway system into the Meadowlands. And when I was Commissioner of Labor, I went to New York and I met with Richard Ravitch, and the head of the Tri-State Transportation Committee, and presented this plan. Ravitch loved it. It wasn't my plan to get it, but I wish it were. It was a great idea. Could be done at maybe a third or less of the price than the ARC tunnel. By the time I get back from that meeting to Trenton, I got a call from the governor's office and I was told to cease and desist because the people at the Tri-State Transportation Committee, who told me at that meeting that this plan was better than theirs, but theirs had legs, had called the Port Authority, and a good friend of mine who was high up in the Port Authority called the governor's office. And the chief of staff of the then governor called me and said, "You got to stop this. You're Commissioner of Labor. Stay in New Jersey for a while." But that plan, frankly, had we succeeded and had it been on the books, I think would have saved a lot of aggravation in the Meadowlands. I think, in all honesty, and I'll say this in retrospect, I think would have saved IZOD for a lot of reasons. There wouldn't be competition in this arena, but be that as it may. It did resurface recently, by the way, from Bloomberg's office, of all places. Of all places. And by the way, it's New Jersey Transit owns the right-of-ways from Hoboken into the Meadowlands now. All it would have cost was a tunnel from West 14th Street and 11th Avenue into Hoboken, so that the Canarsie line, which runs along 14th Street in New York, connects with every single major subway system, could have come over here. So sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but that would have been a great plan, I think. It would have saved a lot of aggravation, a lot of carried an awful lot of people, and created a lot of resources monetarily for the Meadowlands in terms of just parking alone.
Other questions? I wonder, Chris, let me just ask you, based upon what you heard, from an investment point of view, I guess, how critical do you see this transportation discussion? Sounds to me like it's pretty key and it opens up a lot of opportunities. From your Wall Street perspective, does that make sense, or is there another perspective that you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is pretty critical. And again, I look at Las Vegas a lot, so let me use that as an example. I mean, Las Vegas is not a perfect, the airport's got tons of capacity, there's no issues there. They're actually expanding it, and meanwhile, the airlines are pulling planes out, so it's kind of interesting. But, Las Vegas is not perfect. Now, it's not 12 miles to the strip from the airport, it's about 4 miles. But the bigger problem there is what do you do when people get there? I mean, if you've ever been to Las Vegas, trying to get up and down the strip can take you an hour at different points of the day. And they have a little monorail that goes from a few casinos to a few other casinos, but it's broken half the time. And the city has its own monorail that costs $5 nobody wants to pay for. So I would actually not look at their model. I don't think Las Vegas is incredibly efficient. It's great at getting people to the airport, and then it's everyone for themselves. So if we can create a model here, the challenge might be a little bit greater with the distance involved, but I think that is clearly an issue. And I guess the other thing I would add to the earlier point, I mean, part of the problem I think with Atlantic City is you don't have public company involvement really anymore. I mean, back in several years ago, right, Harris was publicly traded. Harris is obviously a huge player in Atlantic City. It's now owned privately. They over-levered it. They really don't have money to fix up the properties. Trump used to be publicly traded. There are a lot of issues there, but they're no longer public. Public companies can raise money, and they have in the past, and they'll continue to in the future. But unfortunately, Atlantic City doesn't have. The only one you really have is Regatta is half owned by Boyd and half owned by MGM. And MGM's kind of sort of trying to sell their half, but not really. And you know, I think it's a disadvantage. You can get better investment in the casinos themselves if you had more publicly traded companies. Not much we can do about that. That was done by bankers.
Great. Okay. Maybe your name and where you're from.
How you doing? My name is Lincoln, and I'm actually a Atlantic City resident. I'm actually born and raised there. So, Mr. Carver, a lot of what you said was dead on. A lot of what you said, even the problems, and the first gentleman that spoke about the issues that they kind of deny in Atlantic City. And what it is really that people don't really understand what goes on in Atlantic City. Even though you live there, you're born there, you're raised there, you're kind of like detached still from the actual going on. All you know is there's a casino there, and I go to work, and I go home, but they don't understand the role that the casino plays as much. And I think it's kind of like Detroit, and how we become dependent on the car industry in Detroit, and then in Detroit, the car industry left, everybody was like, well, what happened? And I think that if something doesn't happen to Atlantic City, we will go the way of Detroit if the casinos fail, in a sense. So I'm glad that a lot of what you said was brought up. A lot of what the first gentleman had said, Mr. Hanson had mentioned about marketing Atlantic City. I had said that numerous times about changing the dynamic away from focusing on the casino to the beaches, because we are the only casino town with a beach in the country, I believe. So, I mean, that is something that we have that no one else has. So, I like the idea of renovating Atlantic and Pacific Avenue because it is our hope. I like the idea of the art district because that was also talked about. We do have a museum and an art center, but it needs to be broadened and bigger and come off the boardwalk because the residents don't really go to the boardwalk. So I think a lot of what was going on, what you mentioned is going on, is very important. And I think that if you do see resistance in the city, which is very likely to happen, it's because people don't understand. You know, people don't understand, and the legislature in Atlantic City is just basically people, everyday people who just elected to office, and they too don't understand. So, and there's no communication between legislation and the people to help them understand where you guys will be coming from to bring and it really feels like a coup d'etat more or less than I'm here to prevent the total collapse. So, I mean, I don't know how much my voice has any bearing on anything, but I will say that there are people, a few of us, who understand what's going on.
I wish you were in Atlantic City right now saying those very same things, because that's exactly where we're at. The improvements of Atlantic City have to go westward into the community. If we don't, we will fail. That's the issue with this district, is that the improvements, you can't make the district safer than other city. The city has to be safe in totality. It has to be safe for the residents, it has to be safe for visitors. It's got to be clean for the residents, it's got to be clean for the city. And the city residents have to be part of this process. One of the things that I didn't talk about that I was rather insistent that we do, and I think that my successor, Susan A. Thompson, was doing a magnificent job of it, as I knew she would. We were going to revive a historic African-American corridor along Kentucky Avenue. And they were outlets like Club Hall and the 500 Club and whatnot. It's an important segment of the history of Atlantic City to a large part of that community. We think it can be successful, we think it can attract more investment, and we think that the city itself, that the city residents themselves will benefit from the creation of these small businesses. The last thing that we wanted to do, and we will do in this new district, I'm convinced, will be to incorporate Gardner's Basement, which should be a major, major attraction. It's back in the marina area of Atlantic City. Too many people know about it. There's an aquarium back there. You can make that into a Pier 39 or a Baltimore Inner Harbor or a Boston waterfront on our scale. Those things are all possible. With the resources available, they should be done.
Okay,
Thank you, sir.
And I think this was a good concluding comment. So if you would join me in thanking this panel. And we're going to bring up our next panel, and I'm going to turn this over to Rich Lee, who's the Communications Director at the Hull Institute of Public Policy and is our co-sponsor today. Rich?
No, it's not okay. Hold on.
Okay, I'd like to resume the panel and thank everybody for coming. As we put together this conference, as you can see, we were fortunate to have many of the key players from the gaming industries in New Jersey. And as Rich Keevy and I were talking about how to organize the session, we kind of roughly figured the first panel would be people to deal with some of the present and more immediate issues. Second panel would look at some of the more long-term issues that are on the table. One of those is sports betting. As Rich said earlier, unfortunately, Senator Lesniak is unable to join us. He's certainly been in the forefront on that issue, but hopefully some of the other panelists can talk about sports betting a little bit from their perspective. But one of the other big issues on the table is the future of the Meadowlands Racetrack. And we're very fortunate to have Jeffrey Burrell with us here now, who is the president of Newmark Friend. But for our purposes, I think we're interested in the work that he's done with racetracks in New York State, possibility of him coming into here in New Jersey. And we also have Jim Simpson, who is the president of Hanover Shoe Farms. And again, for our purposes, we're interested in the work that he's done with racinos and kind of making them, working on the legislation in Pennsylvania, should something like that come to New Jersey. And lastly, when we're putting together the panels, I guess it's a prejudice on my part, having spent a number of years as a journalist, I thought it would be good to have someone on one of the panels who was a journalist who's covered the industry. And we're fortunate to have Susan Parnley from the Philadelphia Inquirer, who in this day and age, reporters get split on a whole bunch of different beats, but she gets to cover the gaming industry, the gambling industry, and as you read in her bio, has won some awards. And I think it'd be nice to have someone at the end to bring everything into context, give us some objective analysis. So I'd like to actually start out with Jeff, talk about what you've done, your work, maybe what you see happening in New Jersey. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I wanted to thank Richard Keevy for inviting me and people at Rutgers. I actually came back from vacation to do this, so my wife wasn't that happy, but here I am. And I think it's an important subject. I know that many of you, or certainly many in the standard industry, are vitally concerned about what's happening at the Meadowlands. As you know, kind of accidentally in December, I made a phone call to Tommy Lucento asking him how things were going, and he told me, well, why don't you give Craig Domaluski a call in the governor's office and ask him. And I called him and he said, gee, it's good that you're calling because we're about to announce that the Meadowlands is closing. So that was kind of a shock to me, and I think a shock to everyone in the industry. I think we all recognize the work that John Hanson had put in, and the fact that his report made it clear that he thought the state should get out of running racetracks. And I don't think there's any question that that's the right thing to do. The racetracks are losing a substantial amount of money, and when you have a government that's in an unenviable position, having to cut back on expenses, and you see cities cutting back on police and fire and teachers, it's a little hard to justify the state owning two racetracks that lose $25 to $30 million a year. So fortunately, I was able to persuade, with the help of the horsemen at the Senator Owners Association, we were able to persuade the governor's office, Craig, Jeff Chiesa, and the governor himself to allow us an opportunity to see if we couldn't come up with a model that would make us self-sufficient. And I've been working on that really for the last 3 months. Actually, today is the deadline to have a deal in place, but I think we'll get an extra 2 weeks, hopefully, because it's been a difficult process. And I think before we try to really finalize a deal with the state, we need to have a deal in place with all the unions and that's really where we're focused right now. And it's not easy for a union leader to tell his members that he's negotiated a new contract, and part of that contract is a wage decrease, and in some cases benefit decrease. Most union leaders typically go back to their members with a package of wage increases, benefit increases, etc., etc. But I think we recognize that those days are over for the moment, and clearly, in order for the Meadowlands to survive, we're going to have a deal with the unions that make some concessions to bring the cost of operating the Meadowlands down. And I'm reasonably optimistic that at the end of the day, we'll be able to achieve that. I've actually spoken to quite a few. I make it my business. I'm kind of a hands-on operator, so I've met with quite a few of the tellers and other people there, and I think I have an idea of what's important to them. And most of them seem pretty supportive, except for one woman that I met who was very unsupportive, but wanted to see. I want to see something. So I said, well, we're committing $100 million. Doesn't that count for anything? And she said, no, not really. We have two extremes. But, so I'm kind of optimistic. I've got some of the financing in place. I have a meeting tomorrow with two major investors that have expressed a desire to come in with us. So hopefully by the end of the day tomorrow, if everything goes right, I think we will pretty much have a package in place where we have at least verbal commitments to get the thing going. But having said that, I'm tackling an industry that's in decline and has been in decline for a long time. And I think the reason for that are many, but certainly most of the facilities that we have are outdated and too big. So when you go to the Meadowlands, the first thing you notice is that it's empty, or so it appears empty, because obviously it was built for a different era when 40,000 came to opening night. And I think average attendance at the Meadowlands in the first year that it was open, average was over 17,000. So that included your Mondays and Tuesdays, which meant that they were getting 30,000 people every Saturday night. And average attendance today is probably 3,000. So 90%, they're down to maybe 15%, 20% of the number of customers. Now, part of that is 35 years ago, there was no off-track betting. There was no computers that you could make a wager on. There was no OTW. So if you wanted to make a bet, you had to come to the Meadowlands. Today, obviously, people sit in front of a computer who are big bettors. The other problem that the racing industry has is that they made a horrible, terrible, catastrophic mistake 15 years ago when somebody came up with the bright idea to send their signal to just about anybody who wanted it in exchange for a payment of 3%. And what that's done is basically taken all of their good customers and forced them to bet with somebody else who has a computer, typically in Oregon, and a phone, and it could handle $100 million, rebates a good chunk of that to the customer, and they keep maybe 1%. So they're making $1 million with a computer and a phone, and then they make no contribution towards the effort to run the races, to maintain the track, to do anything. So that was a horrible mistake, and I don't know if that can be undone, but you would think that it could be undone if you had people with the will and everybody get in a room and figure out how to undo that, because that makes no sense. So, we have an industry that essentially is supported by older customers who, like myself, grew up in the heyday of racing and still love it and come out. And we have done almost nothing to recruit new younger people to the sport. So you don't have to be a mathematical genius to figure out that over the next 10 or 15 years, the vast majority of our customers will disappear. And if we don't replace them with younger people, then whether we like it or not, there will not be an industry, a racing industry. The other thing that's happened is that the breeding industry has really taken over the business to a large degree. So that's where we're standing. Standard bits, but so that as soon as a horse is good enough to get the public's attention, he's immediately retired to go into stud. I thought the most amazingly obnoxious example of that was when Zenyatta raced, and everybody watched that race, and you know, the horse was on 60 Minutes. My wife wanted to watch it, probably the most watched horse race in years, the Breeders' Cup, and got beat, and the horse that beat Zenyatta was owned by a major breeder in Kentucky, and the next day he announced that the horse was retiring. So here was a major breeder basically saying to the fans of horse racing, screw you, you're stupid, I don't know why anybody would bother, but I'm retiring a horse that is probably the only other horse that's well known in the country, because that's the horse that beats Zenyatta. So it's a challenge. I think I'll be successful. We have a new building plan. I really should have brought a presentation. I could have showed it to you. It's beautiful. I think we'll be successful in getting new customers. I think we'll be successful in getting younger people to come. We've been successful at Tioga Downs, upstate New York, which is a brand new racino that I opened 5 years ago. And truthfully, the reason I embarked on that project was I said to myself, I can't believe you can't get people to come to a racetrack. It just doesn't make any sense. And having been to so many racetracks, I concluded that while most racetracks do just about everything they can to make sure you don't come back, so maybe if we tried a different approach, you could get people to come. And it's worked. We've been very successful in getting people to come. We've been totally unsuccessful in getting them to understand how to read a program and how to wager. People come, they get $2, they have a good time, some of them never leave their seats, they cheer for the horses. But it's really unimportant whether they bet or not, because I have slot machines in the building, and basically the racing is so unimportant to our bottom line that we kind of look at it. Tioga was built from scratch, which most racinos were not. Most racinos were where they took the existing racetrack and they just put slots somewhere in it. But Tioga was built from scratch, so I designed it intentionally to integrate the racing and the slots parlor. And as a result, we see an immediate spike in our slots revenue when the racing ends. So our racing customers clearly will come into the casino. Other tracks, you need a search warrant to find the racing, so there's not a lot of crossover. But we designed Tioga, and it's successful. I think four of the 10 biggest days that we've had in our casino were either opening or closing night of racing. So clearly we use the racing to market the casino, and it's been successful. At Vernon, unfortunately, we have the opposite, where I bought it in the middle of bankruptcy, and they had a hotel here, a casino in the middle, and a racetrack on this side. It made no sense. They should have either attached the casino to either the hotel or the racetrack instead of putting it in the middle. So we were able to attach it was closer to the hotel, so we attached it to the hotel. So that's, we're expanding the hotel there, but it's not nearly, it's still an old racetrack, and it's a little discouraging to me. The big problem that I have, I can get people to come to the Meadowlands. I'm not the least bit concerned, because I'll make it a fun thing. Think about it. If you have free admission, program costs, free parking, program costs a couple of dollars, make the food affordable, which we do at Tioga. We don't gouge on the food. Make it edible, which is also edible. So if you think about it, a guy could come with his kids or friends and maybe spend $12 for programs and another $10 for hot dogs and bet a couple of bucks. So maybe he's going to spend $50 to come to the races. I have tickets to the Jets, and besides the PSL, I think the tickets are $390. So That's 4 times 4. That's $1,600. Parking. So to go to a Jet game, I would say you got to figure it's $2,000 versus $50 to go to the races. So you can't imagine that if you make it a fun experience that people won't go, especially when you look. Tioga Downs only has 750,000 people within 50 miles and never had a racetrack. So I don't have any old customers at Tioga. So every single customer that I have at Tioga is a new customer. There are no existing old dog customers. So, you know, the Meadowlands has 20 million people within 50 miles. So I would hope I could get the same. If I get twice as many people as I get at Tioga, it'd be pretty successful. So I think I can accomplish that. The real problem for me is I'm relying on people betting on my signal at other racetracks, and for the most part, other racetracks are doing little or nothing to promote horse racing. And it goes back to the business model. If the business model is that 5% of your revenue comes from horse racing and 95% comes from slot machines and food, well, you're certainly not going to spend a lot of effort promoting horse racing. I think we've seen, I know that there's an effort in Florida now to do away with dog racing by the people who own the dog tracks and also have slots. I remember a couple of years ago, I was researching and I was in Newport and I saw a sign that said Highlight Casino, and I got persuaded my wife, come on, let's go see what it looks like. And when I walked in, I saw this beautiful casino and I said, where's the Highlight? And the woman said, oh, the governor let us eliminate the Highlight. So I think that's kind of the mentality probably that most of your racino owners have today, and you can't blame them. Just from a business model, if you're a public company like Harrah's and some of these other companies, you've got to do what's best for your stockholders, and what's best for your stockholders clearly isn't to promote horse racing. It's to eliminate horse racing, because horse racing loses money, and you can build a shopping center where the racetrack is. So my fear really is that other tracks won't promote the sport, and my signal being sent out will not be as lucrative. However, I've got a great partner in Liam Matus, who's with Cantor Gaming. He's a complete genius, and I believe that he's got some great ideas on kind of how to make people come up with wagers and betting that is kind of, you know, it doesn't require you to read a program. And I think that that's the key. We've got to come up with a wagering format that people can look at as a fun thing. Just like roulette, you know, red or black, you know, that's probably the best way to look at it. So we're going to not, and I'm not doing this just to open a racetrack. We're going to try everything possible different that hasn't been tried, and to see what works and what doesn't work. And in my experience in racing and the casino business, you try something, you'll know right away if it works. If it doesn't work, you try something else. So we're clearly going to be trying. We're going to be trying a lot of different things. It'll be a very different racing model. We're fortunate that the horsemen have agreed to reduce the number of race dates to 81. I think that's vitally important. We have way too many race dates. And you've got to have a season. The racing world has, you know, the tracks that have a season, Saratoga, Thoroughbred has a season's pack. Keeneland has a season's pack. Delmar has a season's pack. And even Monmouth last year, they did something very clever with the championship, and they did very well. Unfortunately, the fact of the matter is that here in New Jersey, we're competing with tracks that are being subsidized by the slots. So from a purse standpoint, if you have, like the Meadowlands, we have trouble filling the card, even though everyone perceives the Meadowlands the #1 harness track in the world. And I learned that from, I had dinner with the guys from Betfair, from England and Australia, and he told me, he said, you don't understand, in England, in France, in Europe, the Meadowlands is the #1 harness track in the world. There is no other. And we can't fill the card because people are going to Yonkers, and where they get a $50 million supplement from the slots, and they're betting, they're racing for more money, even though there's, you know, they love the Meadowlands, they love me, they love everything, but the owner says, yeah, you know, and it's easier to win it at smaller tracks. So you need a pretty good horse to win at the Meadowlands. At a half-mile track, you just need a horse that can get out of the gate pretty good and may hang on and win and get a piece of the track. And the same at Chester. Chester and Pocono are getting $20 million apiece in subsidies. So I don't know how the thoroughbreds are going to do it, frankly. They've got a big problem because we're used to racing for, 150, 160,000 at the Meadowlands. They can do it. These guys raced for $1 million last summer, and I don't know if they're going to be happy racing for 200,000 or whatever it's going to be. So it's very difficult when you're surrounded by states that are subsidizing the racing. Having said that, I think the governor is on the right track. I think in these tough times, it's only fair to ask that the racetrack be self-sustaining. Having said that, if you look around, essentially what you have in New Jersey is an industry that has 33,000 jobs, which is the casino industry, and the governor has chosen that focus on helping that industry, which makes perfect sense. In a state like New York or Pennsylvania, they've gone in the exact opposite direction. They didn't have casinos to worry about, but they had racing jobs to worry about, and they wanted the revenue that gambling provides. Why let people drive to Atlantic City or to Connecticut or even the day trippers that were referred to. So they in turn looked at and said, okay, I'm going to subsidize racing because racing has a lot of jobs, and I'll take the revenue, I'll tax it. Now, when these high tax, what you see now is that almost any state that's going to allow gambling is going to want a high tax rate, unlike Atlantic City, where the tax rate's 8%. In Pennsylvania, it's 55%. In New York, it's 60%. And so what you have really is states. The job creation in New Jersey is in Atlantic City. The job creation in New York and Pennsylvania is in the racing industry. And the taxes that the racing that are raised in New York and Pennsylvania far exceed the taxes that are raised in New Jersey. So it's an interesting dilemma, but we're going to give it a shot. The governor's been very helpful with his people, and hopefully the pieces will come together and the unions will work with us. And I would say within the next 2 weeks we'll either have a deal or call it a day. So thanks.
2 weeks ago, the Pennsylvania Gaming Board Chairman, Greg Feit, testified in front of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, ultimately to get his budget kept intact, but he did give some remarkable numbers, and I would like to use that. In 2004, the Pennsylvania legislature signed slots at the racetrack legislation. Since then, $4.7 billion has been shifted to the Pennsylvania State Treasury. $2.8 billion of that has gone to property tax relief for senior citizens. $796 million has gone into purses for thoroughbred and standardbred horses. At least in the standardbred business, I can assure you that's made an increase of 50% in the breeding industry in Pennsylvania and growing. Over 14,000 jobs have been created by the racinos in Pennsylvania and the racing industry. 1,100 more mares were bred in the standardbred business since then. An interesting thing, and I think the casinos really need to look at this. On live racing days in Pennsylvania, there's a 5 to 15% increase in slot handle. That's an impressive and important number. Pennsylvania, and I would like to say this to the casinos in New Jersey, Pennsylvania and New York and Connecticut are not your enemies, they really are your role models. I think that the racing industry and the casino industry can live symbiotically. We're doing it in Pennsylvania. Thank you very much.
2 I just got an email from my editor wondering where I'm at. He knows. The joke was, don't say I think in front of anything you say. That's why it's a little different for journalists to be on this side. But what I can share with you is just sort of the perspective as a gaming writer for the last nearly 7 years of what's happened to Atlantic City and the coverage it's gotten and how my beat has shifted in covering the two states. It almost seems like the two states on revenue, on employment, on horse racing, they're like an inverse of each other. Two key dates I want to share with you that as a reporter I covered. July 3rd, 2003, I was still a Trenton State House reporter covering Governor McGreevey back then. And following him that afternoon, it was a trip to Atlantic City. That was the day the Borgata had its grand opening, and it was a very festive party occasion. Fast forward 7 years later, July 21st, 2010, it's Republican Governor Christie behind Boardwalk Hall, kind of almost a somber wake atmosphere to announce what was then being described as a state takeover of the Atlantic City Casino and Tourism District. So you can see kind of what's happened from 2003 to 2010, the dramatic differences. In 2003, there were 12 casinos in Atlantic City, and it was still literally the only game in town. It was Atlantic City and Las Vegas. And by 2004, when I inherited the Atlantic City beat full-time, there were 12 casinos, and revenues were inching up every year since 1978 when the first casino opened, which was resorts. So we're looking at a 25-year span of just record revenues going up every year. It seemed like the sky was the limit. And, you know, Pennsylvania was not even on the radar screen at that point. By 2006, that was the peak year for Atlantic City, $5.2 billion in revenue, the highest ever, with still 12 casinos. And the first Pennsylvania casino didn't open until November of 2006. So you can see where I'm going with this. So 2006 to 2010, Atlantic City's revenues went from $5.2 billion to $3.6 billion. Pennsylvania, in just 4 years, since its first casino opened in November to last December, in 4 years, it's now a $2.5 billion industry. So what took Atlantic City to build for 25 years, over 25 years? What analysts said last week at the Pennsylvania Gaming Congress that was held in Philadelphia was by next year, it's a very real possibility that the 10 casinos in Pennsylvania can surpass Atlantic City's revenue by the end of 2011, surpassing the $3 billion mark. That kind of tells you where the chasm is right now on where the revenue, where the employees, where horse breeders are going. It's Pennsylvania. It's no, you know, the numbers you've seen this morning, it's not an accident that everything on the Pennsylvania column has the up arrow, and everything in New Jersey is kind of going down. And if you look at the loss of $1.6 billion in revenue with the AC casinos alone, over 7,500 casino employees have been lost in Atlantic City since late 2006. A vast majority of those are now working in Pennsylvania. You have breeders now going to Pennsylvania because they get a tax credit under the gaming law to breed in Pennsylvania. You have purses in Pennsylvania that have gone up over 30% since 2006. At the same time, again, that inverse relationship of horse racing, calendar years, purses, breeders going downward in New Jersey, and everything is going up in Pennsylvania. What's also noteworthy about 2006 is that was a year, I think Chris Waronka from Deutsche Bank mentioned this. That year, you had 4 major companies announcing land being bought and building billion-dollar casinos. Those were MGM, Pinnacle Entertainment, Wally Bar, and Curtis Bashaw on the southern end of the boardwalk, and the Morgan Stanley Casino, which later became the Rebel Casino. So of those four, only Rebel today is the one moving forward. So you could kind of see Wall Street doesn't like uncertainty, and you have a lot of that in Atlantic City. And if you're wondering why investment has dried up, that has a lot to do with what's going on with the climate. And it's impacting where Atlantic City wants to go. It wants to move away from its past and become, an overnight destination with luxury hotels, a major airport, the infrastructure, everything to support that kind of clientele that Las Vegas has. But it has all these obstacles. We've already gone through the fact it doesn't have the airport. It clearly doesn't have the hotels. You have 17,100 hotel rooms in Atlantic City among 11 casinos. You have over 150,000 in Las Vegas. So, to be considered even a serious convention town, you need 25,000 hotel rooms. That's the threshold. That's the minimum threshold for a major convention group to want to come to Atlantic City. So what happens if you have a resort that relies on over 50% of its income, its revenue, on 3 months of the year, which is the summer? And in the wintertime, you go backwards and you shut down hotels, you shut down restaurants during the wintertime because you have no customer base. And you're expecting to attract convention groups when you have hotels and restaurants that are closed in the wintertime. So you have kind of this, this tension of going backwards and trying to want to be something moving forward that you're clearly hindered by. I know Tom Carver, I think he's still here. Tom?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, here we are. I wrote this story last, it's dated 2 weeks after Governor Christie's visit to Atlantic City. It was a page one Sunday story. It was August 1st, 2010. And the headline was, Family Friendly Atlantic City, ? Christie's Plan, No Sure Bet. And these were a few graphs with Tom Carver. We talked extensively about the problems Atlantic City faces trying to move forward and become this overnight resort destination and not just a drive-in day tripper market. He said, Tom Carver at the CRDA knows much work lies ahead for that to happen. There are 17,100 hotel rooms in Atlantic City's 11 casinos, far short of the 25,000 room minimum to be considered a serious convention town. Las Vegas, where conventions make up 15% of business, has over 150,000 rooms. In addition, Atlantic City International Airport needs to be expanded for conventioneers and international tourists to get here. City streets need to be widened, dilapidated homes gutted. The list goes on and on. Tom Carver says, we've got to redefine the boardwalk and Atlantic Avenue, our front door, and the perception people have when they come to the city. Soon, he said, one of the first things to greet visitors will be an entertainment district, a full square block of outdoor stages, nightclubs, bars, restaurants called AC Live, as part of an expanded walk retail outlet entertainment mall. The main event should be, Tom Carver said, I'm going to Atlantic City and not, I'm going to the Borgata, Caesars, or Showboat. The city has to be the destination, but there's that underlying tension. How do you get there? When you don't have the infrastructure, you don't have the hotels, you close your restaurants in the wintertime and some of your hotel towers because you don't have a clientele 9 months out of the year. These are some of the questions that I've been asking about the Christie plan and how can you get around these issues and work to improve the city and at the same time know you're racing against the clock when Pennsylvania will become a $3 billion gambling industry by next year. I don't know what the answers are, and what I've been covering, hopefully in the next few months, we're going to know with the tourism district that's going to be remapped and the borders set forth on April 19th with the CRDA board meeting. The only analogy I can make of this is that, Atlantic City had the monopoly. It's like a widget manufacturer. You had a monopoly. You were the only widget maker in town, in the country, other than Las Vegas. And all of a sudden, 48 other states, except Utah and Hawaii, now have some form of gambling. That's your competition now. And you've lost the convenience gambler to Pennsylvania, Delaware, now Maryland, which is getting about 5 casinos by 2012. You've got Ohio, which is going to get casinos and within a year and a half. These are the issues that Atlantic City is facing, and there's no easy answers. And as was mentioned earlier, it's hard to convince investors to come in and pay top dollar for land. I'll give you an example. In 2006, when MGM made its investment in Atlantic City, land was going for about $20 million an acre. $20 million an acre. You put that in perspective. In December, Resorts Casino, which went into foreclosure and had its title transferred over, sold for $31 million. A casino in Atlantic City sold for $31 million in December. Last month, Trump Marina was bought by Landry's Inc. of Houston, Texas, which operates restaurant chains, for $38 million. So it went from $20 million an acre in 2006 to now you're buying a casino in Atlantic City for $38 million last month. That should tell you what has happened to land and casino valuations in Atlantic City. And everything in that city is tied to the casino industry. You have the record crowds, you have the demand up, everybody wants to be there in the summer, everybody wants to own property in and around that area. So everything goes up in real estate. That's why it was impossible to buy in 2006. And now, you're selling casinos for $38 million. You're seeing record foreclosures in the shore area. Nothing happens by happenstance. Everything is connected to the industry. And these are the challenges facing Atlantic City right now. And we're supposed to get the answers, and we're supposed to get more clarity on the Christie plan in the next few months. And the legislature pretty much opened the door with the package of bills to start moving forward. But it has a huge, 600-pound gorilla next door that it has to deal with, and that's called Pennsylvania. So that's my perspective on what's happened with my beat. It went from 12 casinos in AC to 11 casinos in 2007 when the Sands was imploded. Now I cover 20 casinos, 10 in Pennsylvania, 21 casinos, 10 in Pennsylvania, 11 in Atlantic City. Atlantic City, and I'll close in on this, and what makes it much different from Las Vegas, it is a regional drive-in market. You do have a quarter of the population within a gallon of gas in driving distance. That's how densely populated this area is. So it's kind of hard to make the analogy with the Vegas, which is primarily a fly-in market. But in closing, just keep in perspective, 62% of Atlantic City's clientele comes from North Jersey and New York. 22 to 23% comes from southeastern Pennsylvania. That's my neck of the woods. That's the Philadelphia suburbs, the city, and South Jersey. So if you want to protect that market, how are you going to do it when you've got now 3 casinos in the Philadelphia market? Harrah's in Chester, Parks in Van Salem, and Sugar House on the Philadelphia waterfront. And you've got Sands Bethlehem, which now siphons the North Jersey and New York gamblers to that Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania. What is left for Atlantic City? And soon you're going to have, like I said, casinos in Maryland, which is another feeder market for Atlantic City. So these feeder markets, which were feeder markets for Atlantic City, have become gambling markets on their own right. And Pennsylvania is the clearest indication of that, clearest sign of that. And like I said, it was just said last week in Philadelphia, by next year, there's a very real possibility Pennsylvania will surpass Atlantic City in total gambling revenue in just 5 years since opening its first casinos. That's 5 years, and what took Atlantic City over 25 years to build. Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all the panelists for being here, sharing their expertise with us on this very important issue. And I'm going to open it up to questions. I'm going to throw one out there to kind of get the ball rolling. And one of the themes that I heard during this discussion and through the earlier one this morning is that one of the keys to success is cooperation, getting a lot of disparate groups on the same page. I know Jeff talked about getting the unions on board, having them make some concessions. That's not traditional, that they've done it in the past. Jim talked about how in Pennsylvania, the horse racing industry and the casino industry realize they're not enemies and are working together. Earlier, I think it was Tom Carver talked about in Atlantic City getting the casino industry to understand the city and vice versa. So I'd like to ask the people on the panel and how you get that to happen in what is really such a contentious issue. And if you were at the legislative hearings, we saw, in addition to the usual, partisan dynamics, some unusual ones. We had the North-South split, horse racing industry, casino industry. How do you get everyone on the same page? And are we moving, at least in a positive direction, beyond maybe what happened, the initial reaction to the Hanson report?
Well, I think that the Hanson report really was a shock to everyone in the harness industry. I don't think anyone was expecting it, to tell you the truth. In fact, the standard industry was supporting Governor Christie's efforts to get elected, so we really weren't expecting that. We were supporting a governor who was going to come up with a plan to eliminate the Meadowlands. I think that I'm not an expert in Atlantic City. I've been there 2 or 3 times in my life. But I think that what we heard today was that they blew it over the last 25 or 30 years. And clearly in my mind, I run 2 casinos with a 60% tax rate. I can't imagine how much money was made in Atlantic City in the heyday with an 8% tax rate. Having an 8% tax rate in Atlantic City would be the equivalent of having a printing press to print money. That's how much money had to be made there. But as we know, they were short-sighted and they didn't do what they should have done. I remember actually being in a room with Donald Trump, whom I know, because we're in the real estate business, when he said to me, well, what do you think of, I think I'm going to go down to Atlantic City and open a casino. And I said, I think it's a great investment until New York and Pennsylvania open casinos. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure that out. And I think Atlantic City was fortunate in that it took a long time for these other states to finally get to the point where they were going to open other casinos. And let's be honest, to a certain extent, no politician wants to raise taxes. That's like the equivalent of signing, your resignation. And, the casino industry is a way of raising revenue without raising taxes and creating jobs at the same time, especially with table games. We've seen it. I own an interest in the Sands project, and I think they've gone from 700 employees when it was without table games to now maybe they have 2,000. So, the one thing about table games, it's a labor-intensive business, and as we see, Atlantic City employs 33,000 people. So I think, if Atlantic City can get some cooperation with the city, with the town, and make it a fun place to go. I just came back from Puerto Rico, and the thing I liked the most about it was the beach, to tell you the truth. That was the appeal for me and my grandchildren. And so I used to go to Atlantic City with my grandmother, believe it or not. Every Christmas she used to go to one of those old hotels. So I used to love Atlantic City. But I don't really know if you'll ever get cooperation. You got to remember what makes me want to focus on the racing is that I own 100 horses. And I own 2 breeding farms, and I've been involved in horse racing all my life. I think to talk to a casino owner and convince him that, racing, there's no question what Jim said is exactly what I said. And on the days you race, your casino revenue will go up. But I don't know if they figure that, I don't know if that translates into taking marketing money and using it, diverting it from marketing the casino to marketing the racing. The problem you have is that, let's say, you know, these tracks, they're only betting $50,000 on track. So let's say you say, well, I want to increase that by 25%, and I'm going to spend, you know, $5,000 to do it by doing, you know, putting ads in the paper and all this other stuff. Well, so think about it. It'll go from 50,000 to 60,000, 70. Let's say you picked up $20,000. We keep 20% of that, so we keep $4,000. We split it with the horseman. So the track owner gets $2,000, and he had to spend $5,000 to get there. For the same $5,000, we figured we would get an extra $25,000 wagered in the casino. So even at a 60% tax rate, I'm going to keep 40% of it. So I'm going to get $10,000 from the same $5,000 investment. So the economics are against the racing industry, and that's the problem. You know, I love it. It's fun. I look at Tioga as an integrated, fun place, and I want people to come and have a good time. And if they have a good time at the racing, that means when they think of Tioga Downs, they're going to think, I had a good time there, it's fun. And maybe when we're not racing in the winter, they'll come back. You know, so there's other aspects of it. We have concerts in Tioga where we know we're going to lose money, but we want the people to have a good time. I don't know if a public company would approach it.
Anyone else want to try in?
Just add something on that. I covered all 3 hearings in Atlantic City, the Meadowlands, and Monmouth Park. And in each area, which was expected, the constituent base had their own issues, concerns, mostly jobs and development for their region of the state. The vibe I'm getting from North Jersey lawmakers is they're not going to just drop the issue of trying to get a casino at the Meadowlands or VLTs. That seems to be something that Lesniak, Paul Serlo, when they were at the Meadowlands hearings, they're not just going to, you know, that's okay, we'll let Atlantic City keep its exclusivity on gambling. That being said, you talk to the horse groups and the breeders, the big issue is what are we going to do after the subsidy ends this December. It's been an 8-year subsidy, and for just background, who don't know what the subsidy is, it was basically money from the Atlantic City casinos to the racetracks, the 4 racetracks in the state, to prohibit them from putting in VLTs. So it was an exchange for them not putting them in. We'll give you a check. Well, that check is going to end come December, and it's been about $176 million over 8 years. You're getting about $7.5 million this year. And if there's only 3 off-track wagering facilities out of 14 that have been built, you know, since the law was passed, I think in 2002, the horse racing industry is asking, what tools are we going to have to survive and, quote, sustain ourselves if we get cut off on the subsidy, we don't have the off-track wagering betting parlors up and running. Where does that leave us when we have to compete with the Delaware, the Pennsylvanias, and the Marylands, all of which have put slot machines in their racetracks? That's the big question mark for them. How do we compete? And what tools is Governor Christie going to give us if we can't have VLTs, we can't have slots, and we can't have a subsidy?
I'd just like to speak on one subject. The OTWs, which I think Bob mentioned, and he's correct, Woodbridge makes $5 million. And we're going to, we get 4 OTW licenses. Our plan is to open an OTW in Bayonne as quickly as possible. But when you open an OTW, you're siphoning business away from the Meadowlands or from Monmouth. So if it was just as simple as opening 4 OTWs and all of them making $5 million apiece, there'd probably be a lot of bidders for the Meadowlands. But we just arbitrarily assume that when Bayonne opens, that it's going to take 15% of the business away from the Meadowlands. So I don't like we've seen, New York City OTB went out of business. Well, one of the byproducts of that is that the attendance at Aqueduct and betting at Aqueduct now has gone way up by a couple $1 million, because those customers now have no choice but get on the subway and go to Aqueduct instead of walking. So, if we don't make new customers, that's the problem. In other words, I can build a beautiful OTW in Bayonne, but is someone who doesn't have any interest in horse racing going to stop by and say, "Oh, what a nice place! I think I'll go there Saturday. I'll spend my Saturdays there." I don't know. Why? And you have people who sit in front of these computers and iPads and go to the beach. There's a lot of other things you can do. So this is tough. I think we need a new form of wagering where it doesn't require the kind of handicapping skills that currently are required. So maybe if we can, make it fun, where you don't have to be, you don't have to know anything. You just have to, go red or black or whatever. Maybe that could work. We'll try it. But it's the OTWs. I wanted to just touch on that. It's not the panacea that everybody thinks. Opening 4 OTWs. If I open one in Cherry Hill, or Sparta, that's fine. It won't take any business. But if I open it in Jersey City, it may take business away from the Meadowlands, and clearly Bayonne, and we know Woodbridge did. So it's not easy.
Jim, you had something you were going to say?
Yes, not long ago, before slots, both our thoroughbred and standardbred business in Pennsylvania was on life support. We needed the casino partners. They also needed us to get into Pennsylvania, which all happened, and we've heard about that. I really don't see a big difference in our situation 6 years ago and New Jersey today. Both industries are on life support. I don't see why there's so much pushback in joining the efforts of horse racing and casino gambling and going viral in this state.
Okay, thanks. Questions from the audience? Yes, Karen.
Rich, if you would please, to address graphically for the audience Suzette's point, could you just click that mouse 1 or 2 slides?
Yeah. Do you want to go to the next one?
I want to go ahead. Forward. Forward, not backward. One more. Okay, this is something that I didn't have time to present, but to Suzette's point of how much we are losing from New Jersey gamblers going to the other venues. This is a counting of license plates that we conducted in 2009 and also on September 23rd of 2010. So if we look at Sugar House, which opened in Philadelphia on that day, 24% of the cars were from New Jersey, 10% at Yonkers on a Saturday night, 60% on a Saturday night at the Sands. Mr. Corral, you'd be happy to see that. 31% at Philadelphia Park, and almost 14% on a Sunday afternoon at Harris Chester were from New Jersey. So for those of us who are visual learners, it makes the point very clearly that New Jersey continues to lose our gamblers to other venues as it becomes more convenient for them to go out of state. So thanks for doing that, Rich, just to make that point.
Okay. Other questions? Yes.
Myron Bell, I'm the horse owner from New Jersey. Atlantic City had a very big opportunity which, for whatever reason, didn't develop. Aqueduct is going to be open this fall, right in near Kennedy International Airport. Access from New York, the most visited city in the world. Close to the Meadowlands, 7-mile rail link. The future is at the Meadowlands for gaming, and it's inevitable it'll come. So I just want to make that point.
Comments? Any other questions, comments? Yes.
I have a question for Jeff. If horse racing takes off back into the Meadowlands, will we ever bring back thoroughbred as well?
I think it's a possibility. I've heard. One of the things that also I didn't mention, but there's a big the thoroughbreds are right now under the law. From essentially when the first 8 months of the year at the Meadowlands, all of the money on on simulcasting goes to the purses for the standardbreds. And then for the last 4 months, it goes to thoroughbreds. And the thoroughbred industry is very unhappy with that. And their argument is that a lot of the people that are wagering on simulcast are betting on thoroughbred signals. Having said that, I think Karen slide showed that in New Jersey, there are twice as many standardbreds as there are thoroughbreds. So there's going to be a fight amongst the two breeds, I think, at some point. And in order for the Meadowlands to survive, we've got to maintain that we're the #1 harness track in the world. And last year, in the fall, they ran a fall meet at the Meadowlands, and they had very little purse money left, and it was really a mediocre, low-end meet, and it really set the Meadowlands back. I think it took, and it sort of carried over. We've got to reestablish the fact that the Meadowlands is the #1 harness track. But people have told me that racing in October, November at Monmouth is not great. Having said that, I think the thoroughbreds really don't like to race at the Meadowlands. There's a cost of converting the track over, and I think the thoroughbreds are going to be confronted with the same problem that we had in standardbreds. They're going to have to reduce the number of dates because actually, depending the subsidy that we were talking about actually ended last December, and there's a question as to whether there was a bill passed that would give the Atlantic City the ability to give money for purse subsidies over the next 3 years. It was a $30 million decline in 15, 10, and 5, but I don't think there's any evidence that the governor is going to go along with that. So right now, in our projections, we have not assumed that. So, but having said that, I don't know how this plays out. It'll be interesting to see how many bids they get from Monmouth today. I'll be interested to read the paper tomorrow and see how many bids they got, because at least with the Meadowlands, the problem with the Meadowlands is we've got to spend a lot of money, but after we spend it, it looks like the numbers are positive, at least in the short run. As I said, if you plug in that your simulcast revenue is going to decline, we're using a decline of 3% a year. That may be low. Thoroughbreds, on the other hand, they don't have to spend any capital, but they have a money-losing racetrack. So it's going to be. I think this hasn't all played out fully yet. It's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next 30 days as the Monmouth situation clarifies itself.
Other questions? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Moira Fanning. I work for the Hamiltonian Society. My obvious interest is horse racing, but I'm putting that aside and speaking as my primary function for the last 25 years, which is New Jersey state taxpayer. No horse pulled or carried a heavier load than the New Jersey state taxpayer. And when we see that we have to subsidize Atlantic City instead of getting $2 billion in property tax relief, we don't understand why the rejuvenation of Atlantic City doesn't include an Atlantic City Middle or an Atlantic City North. And I know the obvious reason, but I dare say that legislation can be changed faster than the state can build an international airport in Atlantic City. And I'm sorry that the first panel, which I believe addressed the current state of the industry, did not feel necessary to stay around and address the long-term state of the industry. But as a Jersey taxpayer, we're perplexed and we're baffled by these decisions.
I'm not sure if anyone on this panel can really answer that, but do you want to comment on it?
No, you can't.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Okay, BJ, I should note, we're actually have been webcasting this live on the Hall Institute website, and people have the ability to follow and ask questions through the internet, and apparently we have one.
We have one that's kind of representative of a lot of the comments we're getting. AC, BMD Tom says, AC is no longer unique AC's no longer unique. They need a project that will again draw customers. The projects could be funded by slots from the Big M. Time for New Jersey, future revenue heading to other states. This comment is kind of representative of a lot of the comments we're getting. There seems to be a perception that it's Atlantic City versus the horse racing industry. I'm wondering if you can address that.
Okay. Well, I think that was one of the things out there, and as you said, Suzette, the idea of having slots in the Meadowlands is something that those North Jersey legislators are not giving up on. So.
It's not, I wouldn't say versus, it's definitely a tension, just like there's a tension between the North and South Jersey lawmakers based on their constituent base and their counties. And again, the key issue that Christie kept emphasizing when he showed up on Boardwalk Hall July 21st, two things was, we cannot, this was a quote, this is not what I feel, but he kept saying, we cannot keep subsidizing a losing industry. The state was no longer in a position to keep subsidizing a losing industry. And he was adamant about not expanding gambling in any shape or form outside of Atlantic City. And that includes VLTs at the tracks.
Jim, I wonder if you could share some of your experiences in Pennsylvania. Like, how did you respond to some of the opponents of racinos there?
Well, the opponents mostly were in the legislature, mostly on the Republican side, and there were slots passed in Pennsylvania by one vote at 2:30 in the morning. I think most of those legislators are happy now. Pennsylvania has a budget deficit, but not as bad as New Jersey's. A lot of the reason we don't have a budget deficit that bad is because of all of the slot money. Because it went to property tax relief, I think it was diffused. A lot of the opposition was diffused. Interestingly, I think people that are fundamentally against gambling are just fundamentally against gambling. We do have legislators that would vote today to repeal the lottery. And that's fine, that's their position, but the opposition, I think they're happy now with the way it turned out. And I think that Pennsylvania proves that harness racing, thoroughbred racing, and casinos can work together. You just look across the border, there's a model that's working.
Okay, thank you. Let's see if we have anyone else. Oh yeah.
I'm LaQuay Weeks. I'm a student here at Rutgers Newark and a staff writer for the campus paper. My question is for Ms. Parmalee. You focus on the need for Atlantic City to become more of a convention town with more hotels. But my question is, how could that be achieved? Because I'm not sure that the size of Atlantic City was taken into account. It's only about 4 or 5 miles long, whereas Las Vegas is, it's in the desert, and it seems that it's much more space for growth. And the only space in Atlantic City seems to be Meadowlands.
Right, that was one of the governor's key recommendations in his plan, was to increase the convention tourism business by 30% each year. And one of the stories I had done on that was, you're not going to be in Las Vegas. I mean, that can't happen. You don't have the hotel mass like I mentioned. But you can go for the smaller, mid-sized groups coming from, Baltimore, coming from Philadelphia, and make yourself a regional convention city where they can stay for a few days and have, book most of those 17,100 hotel rooms throughout the year. And so you don't keep living off 3 months out of the year, June, July, and August. And after Labor Day, it becomes a ghost town. That's a key piece of the governor's plan, is to make it a tourist town, to have mid to small convention groups come in, fill the hotel rooms, the restaurants, go to the casino shows, and yes, go gambling after your meetings. But no, you're not gonna attract 25,000 people. He's looking more, say, from 5 to 10,000 people per convention coming in. But you have enough of those. It's like, the numbers. If the numbers pile up and the volume of 5 or 10,000 group conventions, consistently over the year that helps you wean off relying on just the summer season to live off of. And you can't do that anymore because the gambling revenue is so much down and it's gone so much to Pennsylvania. You need other forms of revenue. That's what he's emphasizing. You need other things to bring you into Atlantic City during those, especially winter months.
I'd just like to ask the people on the panel how sports betting fits into the equation. We will have something on the ballot in November, but it's a two-step process. It's not just a matter of passing it. There's a legal process too, which Senator Lesniak is involved in as well. But certainly, this is an issue with a lot of different dynamics. The horse racing, casinos, sports betting would be one. And from your perspectives, from what you do, how realistic do you think it is that sports betting can come to New Jersey, and what would the impact be?
I'll try to tackle this. I exchanged some emails with Senator Lesniak the last couple nights because I said, why can't you be at this thing? We need you. But he explained to me that it is going to be on the November ballot. When it's a constitutional referendum, the voters say yes or no. If the majority passes it, his plan is to immediately form the enabling legislation to get that to the governor's desk to sign it. Move forward on it, and he said the only thing that will stop is for the feds, the federal government, to try to sue New Jersey to stop sports betting from coming to New Jersey. That's how it was explained to me. So it's a two-step process, and then you've got the federal level to deal with.
How do you see that affecting the racetracks?
Obviously, sports betting is very popular for some bizarre reason, and it's really legal. And it has to do with these trade agreements that were made through the World Trade Organization or something. It was once explained to me. Apparently, at some point in time, the United States signed an agreement that said that only 4 states would be allowed to have sports betting, and so I think it's not just as simple as you think. Obviously, there should be sports betting in America. It's ridiculous. Everybody is betting with some illegal offshore bookmaker, whatever. There's billions of dollars going down the drain every year that should go into the government's coffers. So, I think it's a legal issue. I don't think it's a moral issue, frankly, anymore. I think it's a legal issue. I think if a state can overcome the legal question, or if the U.S. government can go, you'll see, just as you've seen, like there used to be just Atlantic City and Las Vegas, right? Well, now somebody said, there are 47 states that have gambling. Well, there's only sports betting right now, I think, in Las Vegas and in Delaware. In Delaware, it's kind of convoluted. But, if the U.S. government decides to legalize it, it'll be instantaneously available all over the place.
It's going to be a lot harder than it seems because the Delaware situation, which I covered last year, the federal courts and a big entity called the NFL pretty much quashed single game wagering at the Delaware casinos. They only were allowed parlay betting, where you have to be right on all 3 wagers to win. And if Delaware is already one of the 4 states that are allowed some form of it, and that they were just quashed in having full-blown sports betting, you can imagine when other states like New Jersey are trying to have it and get it. The federal courts and an alphabet soup of, NFL, MLB, NCAA, NHL, they all basically pooled their resources to defeat the Delaware effort to legalize sports betting full-blown. And that's kind of a prism, a look at what New Jersey will likely face as well. It's going to be extremely tough.
Yeah, I think we've even had a glimpse of that. I remember there was a bill that had something to do with sports betting in the legislature, and as you said, I think it was the NFL, the sports leagues, came out, in full force, and you have to have the training testify, I think. So, there's a question there, Tom.
One of the problems is if they should pass this, if and when, if the horsemen aren't involved in it, that would really be the end of racing. Because when somebody could wake up the next morning open up their computer and start playing games at the, from the casinos or wherever, where does that put us? Who's going to come to the racetrack? So the horsemen have to be put back in the field. They've been taken out.
We've asked for some kind of...
Leslie asked, that's where he comes in.
Yeah, one of the problems for us is we've asked for some kind of protection, and it's difficult to have an agreement that says what the legislature is going to do. The governor can sign something. It's tricky stuff, but the reality is, yeah, Tom was right. Even internet gambling. Right now, if you want to go on the internet and make a wager legally in New Jersey, you have to bet on horse racing. We now are going to say, well, you can go on the same computer and you can press A, horse racing, B, poker. Well, clearly some of our customers will press B, and then, horse racing takes another hit. It's a real complicated situation we're dealing with right now.
Yes?
So will somebody's strategy be to prevent people from opening their computers and playing games there in order for them to go to the racetrack or the casino?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Does somebody have a strategy to prevent people from opening their laptop and playing games on it so that they are forced to go to the casino and the racetrack?
I don't think that's the strategy. I don't think that, look, I own 2 casinos upstate, and there's a difference of opinion in the casino industry whether internet gambling is good for the casino industry or bad for the casino industry. The only thing that I really worry about when, let's say, the federal government legalizes it, for argument's sake, and now it's a federal law and a federal tax. These casinos employ a lot of people and give the states a lot of revenue. So what happens if we guess wrong and all of a sudden we wake up one day like the horse guys, they guessed wrong 10, 15 years ago when they came up with the bright idea to send their signal to anybody for 3%. That was they thought they were doing the right thing, and they said, well, that's 3% of something is better than, well, what happens if you guess wrong? And now all of a sudden, instead of people going to casinos, they're sitting in front of computers, or their children, the next generation is saying, what am I going to a casino for? I'll just sit in front of my computer. That's what I grew up doing. And all of a sudden you have, tens of thousands of people put out of work and millions and millions of dollars of revenue that the states were counting on. Instead of going to the state, they're going to the federal government. So this is very similar to the idea of simulcasting and allowing people not to come to the racetrack to bet on your product. Somebody came up with that bright idea, it backfired totally. This is a tough one, and that's why you see some casino companies are lobbying for it, and some casino companies are lobbying against it. I couldn't tell you.
But can I follow up on that? But Jeff, it seems to me that your strategy is to give people something unique to do at the racing facility that brings them in regardless of whether they have a computer or not, because their computer will not bring them into contact with a live performance or a group of people they want to spend time with. And I'm surprised you answered my question, because it seems to me that your strategy already overcomes the fact that there is a technology opportunity for somebody who wants to game by providing them with some other means of entertainment.
The problem is that right now the Meadowlands, the revenue from wagering is $30 million. The majority of it does not come from on-track handling. So what I said was, I can get people to come, but I can't get them necessarily to bet. And there's no way that I can generate $30 million from people just betting at the track. So the reality is, yeah, my strategy is to get people to come have a good time and hopefully enjoy themselves, but at the same time, I'm relying on people betting over the, part of our deal is we would have a 35% interest in MJ4 Bets, which is the internet phone wagering. So I can't generate $30 million in on-track handling anymore, not in this day and age. So it's a problem.
Okay, well, I think we're just about wrapped up. I was going to ask Rich if you have any closing remarks, or I see Rich has his coat on, so I guess it's up to me to wrap up. So I want to thank Rich and the folks at Rutgers for partnering with the Hall Institute. Thank all our panelists. And thank all of you for coming. As I said, it's a tough issue, but I think we have some smart minds to work on it. Thank you.